Chapter 1168. Take down Mo Bay City? Then what if we don't take it down? Ning Wenfeng decisively grasped the topic and asked. Sure, Wanshan didn't answer. However, whether it was Ning Wenfeng or Gu He, they both knew that if they couldn't take down the fort and the 50,000 soldiers lost their lives, then they would have to bear all the responsibility. At that time, not only would they not receive any rewards, they would also be punished or even beheaded. For a moment, there was no movement in the tent. Obviously, the three of them knew what was going to happen next. Because of this, they didn't know what to say. Seeing the result of years of hard work being ruined overnight, no one would be in a good mood. Silence couldn't solve the problem, especially at this moment. If they couldn't think of a solution, they would be waiting for someone else to decide their fate. Just as the three of them were racking their brains trying to come up with a better idea, footsteps were heard from outside the tent. Then, a voice that was neither hurried nor slow was heard. Generals, I am Captain Sudei. I have something to discuss with the three of you. I wonder if it would be convenient for you. Sudei, after hearing this, the three of them exchanged glances and shook their heads. Obviously, this name was still somewhat unfamiliar to them. But since there was a visitor, and a major at that, of course, it wouldn't be good to casually reject him. Shi Wanshan's voice came from outside the door. Since you're here, come in. Sudei lifted the curtain and entered the tent. After he entered, everything in the tent seemed to return to normal. Shi Wanshan and the other two sat high up. Even the broken wooden table was thrown to the side and piled up like garbage. This scene was seen clearly by Sudei. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, revealing a smile. When Sudei entered the tent, Shi Wanshan and the other two also saw him clearly. This was especially true for Ancient River. When he saw Sudei's appearance, he was certain that it was this person who had protected Xinguang and prevented him from succeeding. He immediately stood up in anger and said, You're one of Xinguang's men? What? Are you here to throw your weight around? Let me tell you, if that's what you think, then get lost immediately. Otherwise, I'll kill you. As he spoke, Ancient River placed his right hand on his waist. This wasn't the main tent. Weapons were allowed here. With this, he really had the ability to kill. Ancient River said angrily, but Sudei did not even look at him. Instead, he said coldly, What? 300,000 taels isn't enough to make you bleed? If you really want to kill people here, what awaits you will be an irreversible situation. At that time, even your family will suffer and suffer together with you. You, choked by Sudei's words, Ancient River's face flushed red. Speaking of which, the current predicament of the all-encompassing department had a lot to do with his rashness back then. He would not make the same mistake a second time. Ancient River did not speak. Instead, it was Ning Wenfeng's turn to laugh coldly. What? Was General Su really here to flaunt his prowess? Let me tell you, if that's the case, then get lost as soon as possible. We don't have long to live anyway. If you provoke us, we'll start with you first. What Ning Wenfeng said was correct. If there was no better way, then the all-encompassing capital was about to face a very difficult battle. There was an 80% chance that they would be defeated. When that time came, their fate would be sealed. In the face of Ning Wenfeng's threat, Sudei took it seriously. He turned to look at the other party and said seriously, Who said you don't have long to live? There's still a great future waiting for you. It's just that you won't be able to see it. As soon as these words fell, Shi Wanshan and the other two were stunned. It was obvious that they could not understand the meaning of these words. After a few breaths of time, Shi Wanshan was the first to react. He asked tentatively, What does General Su mean by this? What do you mean by a great future? Do you mean that we'll bow down to Xinguang like you? If that's the case, of course not. There are some things that I don't need to say. Do you really think that Xinguang can be happy for long? Or are you unable to see the strength of the 5-star army? Sudei did not wait for Shi Wanshan to speak and interrupted him. Then, he said something that shocked Shi Wanshan and the other two. After several breaths of silence, Ning Wenfeng broke the silence. General Su should be one of Xinguang's people, right? Have you thought about the consequences if these words of yours were to spread? Consequences? Let's not talk about whether that good-for-nothing Tsingguang will believe it or not. Based on the three of you, you wouldn't do something that harms others without benefiting yourself. Am I right? Su Dei, on the other hand, was brimming with confidence. Without waiting for permission, he took a seat and poured himself a cup of tea. It was as if the owner had returned to his own home. Su Dei's words were reasonable. He only had hatred for Tsingguang and the other two. He did not have the slightest bit of affection for them. Of course, he would not spread these words. However, even though they knew this, the three of them still could not make sense of the calm Su Dei. From their point of view, this person appearing here and saying such words was too difficult to understand. However, to be able to become a commander in the army, he was not a nameless person. The three of them were only temporarily stunned by Su Dei's sudden appearance. After a while, they calmed down and thought about it. Ning Wenfeng came to a conclusion. After his expression changed, he asked tentatively, "You are not one of Tsingguang's people. You stay by his side just to find the right opportunity. If that's the case, you should be from another faction. You are the five." "That's right." Su Dei also interrupted Ning Wenfeng's words as he directly admitted it. For words like the five-star army, it was best not to say it in the military tent. Some things were better left unsaid. The fact that Su Dei admitted it so readily made sure Wan Shan and the other two turned pale with fright. They did not expect the five-star army to be so powerful, and their infiltration of the military was so powerful, especially when they thought about how long it had been since the incident happened. Su Dei appeared here in such a timely manner. Did this not mean that there were also spies from the five-star army around them? When they thought of this, Shi Wanshan and the other two could not help but feel cold sweat running down their backs. The enemy was so pervasive. How could such an army be so easy to defeat? Could it be that the siege of the beginning city was also a show that they had directed and acted out? Was it to lure the Beiming army and then wipe them out? "General Su, what about the beginning city?" Ning Wenfeng had gradually adjusted his attitude and looked like he wanted to agree with Su Dei. The incident in the beginning city is true. Su Dei understood what Ning Wenfeng wanted to ask, so he answered decisively. But the important thing was that he added, "It's just that the incident in the beginning city is just a temporary emergency. It won't be long before the situation here changes dramatically. If the three generals still stay here, then you have to make a choice. Of course, you cannot believe my words." "No, I believe. At this moment, how could Ning Wenfeng not believe it? Right now, he was more concerned about where the bright future that Su Dei had mentioned was located. So he was a little hesitant and asked hesitantly that, General Su, you just said something about a great future. It's about joining the five-star army." Su Dei's tone was as calm as water, as if he was talking about a very ordinary thing. To be honest, this time, Bugnam of Gojoseon is very angry about Beiming's actions. If the emperor is only worried that Bugnam of Gojoseon will send the army to attack because of his achievements, it's normal. However, Bugnam of Gojoseon can accept the fact that he actually joined forces with the foreign tribes to attack the Han people. Over the years, I'm sure the three generals are very clear about Bugnam of Gojoseon's policies toward the Han people. Understood. This time, it was not only Ning Wenfeng, but even Gu He, who was beside him, also spoke out in agreement. What a joke. As the army closest to the beginning city, they naturally knew their every move and policy like the back of their hand. They also knew that even under their rule, many Han people wanted to live in the beginning city because it was equivalent to heaven for the Han people. Since you're clear about it, I don't need to explain anything else. It's because you're Han people and Han generals. If you're willing to join Bugnam of Gojoseon, isn't it the great future that I mentioned? Of course, you don't have a choice now. You can either listen to Shi Hung and be cannon fodder and die, or you can join Bugnam of Gojoseon. At that time, I guarantee that you'll be treated better and have more opportunities to display your strength in the future. Of course, you can also choose to hand me over now. However, in this way, not only you, but even your families will live in Bugnam of Gojoseon's hatred and vengeance. At that time, I'm afraid that you'll be better off dead. Su Dei had thought about what he would face before he came, but he was not afraid. All of this was because he had Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Shandong behind him. The strength of the backer was also a kind of confidence. With this, Su Dei insisted that as long as one was smart, one should know how to make a choice. Therefore, this trip seemed dangerous, but there was still a high chance of success. After Su Dei finished speaking, he sat there and did not make any move to force them. He wanted to give them enough time to consider, because only in this way they would make the most correct choice, and it would also be the most beneficial choice for the 5-star army. The room became silent again. Shi Wanshan and the other two first looked at each other. Then Ning Wenfeng gave Su Dei an apologetic look. Then, the three of them walked to the side and began to whisper. Chapter 1169. Going to North Mo City is sending ourselves to our deaths. If we don't go, we will be disobeying military orders. Right now, we can only seek refuge with the 5-star army. Unexpectedly, the first to speak was the commander Ancient River, who had always been unconvinced by the 5-star army. The reason why Ancient River's attitude had changed so much was because everything that had happened so far had left him bitterly disappointed. This time, it was precisely because his own army had been treated unfairly that what he wanted to do the most right now was to make up for everything. Right now, it seemed that joining the 5-star army was the only way to solve all the problems. Thus, it was reasonable for him to agree. With Ancient River's attitude, Ning Wenfeng, who had originally been a bit hesitant, also said, "That's right. The 5-star army has always treated the Han army very well. For a capable Han general like us, we will definitely be able to play a big role in it. Moreover, everything that Bugnam of Gojoseon has done is very much to my liking. Regardless of whether it is his attitude towards the common people or his policies towards the foreign races, those are things that a true man should do. Joining them, I will not oppose it." Out of the three people, two of them expressed their attitudes. This naturally had to do with the current situation, but it was also greatly related to Yang Shandong's actions that gave them hope. Right now, there was only Commander Shi Wanshan left. It had to be said that Shi Wanshan was originally a bandit. Later on, he gave up the darkness and joined the light. Step by step, he managed to achieve everything he had today. Normally, this kind of experience should make it easier for him to accept the 5-star army, but he was the one who considered it the most. It wasn't because of anything else, but because in his eyes, the great Ming dynasty was the most orthodox. All other powers were nothing more than small powers that depended on them. Before long, they would all become like smoke in the wind. Right now, no matter what, he was still a Beiming Major Rank 2 general. If he gave up everything and joined the 5-star army, and if the 5-star army was defeated by Beiming one day, where would he go? Could it be that he was going to surrender again? Back then, he had surrendered to Beiming because it was his goal. Now that he had seen the darkness and ugliness, he would never go back. He also didn't want to become a slave of 3 surnames like Lu Zhuo in history. He didn't want to betray them, but he didn't know how to deal with the situation before him. However, if you were to ask him to surrender just like that, it wouldn't be to his liking either. As a result, he didn't make a decision on the spot. Instead, he turned around and said to Su Dei, "General Su, this matter is very serious. Can you allow me to think about it before giving you an answer?" Su Dei didn't think that he would be able to convince the other party in a single meeting. As a result, he expressed his understanding and nodded. He took out 300,000 taels of silver and handed it over to Shi Wanshan. "Bugnam of Gojoseon heard about your situation. This is the 300,000 taels of silver that he wanted me to give you. At the very least, it can solve the urgent needs of the army. After all, the soldiers in the army are Han people. Their relatives are also Han people. We can't disappoint the Han people." After saying this, Su Dei swaggered off. He believed that if the other party thought it through, they would definitely take the initiative to look for him. As for what happened today, as long as they weren't stupid, they would definitely tell others about it. After Su Dei left, Shi Wanshan and the other two looked at each other in dismay. especially when they looked at the 300,000 taels of silver in front of them. They didn't know what to say. The 30,000 Han soldiers who died in the Wangquan division were all killed in the battle with the Five-Star Army when they attacked the beginning city. For this reason, the Five-Star Army also paid a certain price. Now, the relatives of these enemies actually needed to be comforted by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Just based on this, the three of them felt a burning sensation on their faces. I really don't know what to say. Sure, Wanshan's face was red as he held it in for a long time before he finally said this sentence. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon is very broad-minded, especially his deep feelings for the Han people. It's not something we can imagine. With this kind of behavior, I'm willing to follow him. Ning Wenfeng said with a serious expression. This was equivalent to expressing his stance. Ancient River already had this idea before. After seeing Su Dei's behavior, how could he hesitate? He immediately said, I also agree. Only Sure Wanshan was left among the three of them. One could see that his face was alternating between red and white. It was obvious that he was struggling and struggling in his heart. Now that both of his brothers had agreed, if he were to oppose, then he wouldn't have anyone to help him in the future. When he thought about everything that had happened since he met the Five-Star Army until now, his heart began to tilt. However, it didn't mean that he didn't have any worries. Both of you, have you really decided to do this? Eunuch Deng Chong has treated us well. As the eunuch of the Wangquan capital, Deng Chong was originally sent by the emperor to monitor Sure Wanshan and the others. However, because he knew how to conduct himself, everyone's relationship with each other was very good. This was very rare in the great Ming dynasty's army. Sure Wanshan was a very loyal person. Now that Deng Chong was mentioned, it was reasonable. This was because once they all surrendered to the Five-Star Army, Deng Chong's responsibility would be great. It wasn't impossible that he would be beheaded because of this. When Deng Chong was mentioned, Ancient River's expression changed. Obviously, he also thought that his actions might bring some bad consequences to the other party. However, Ning Wenfeng wasn't worried. Instead, he chuckled and said, What's so difficult about this? Can't we just take Eunuch Deng with us? Right now, he's in the Wangquan capital. Our family members are also there. Since we have to think a way to take them away, why would we need to take one more person? Not bad, not bad. This time, Sure Wanshan and Ancient River both nodded in agreement. After resolving the last doubt in their hearts, the three of them put away the 300,000 taels of silver and sat together to discuss the matter of joining the Five-Star Army. Previously, the new Second Army was besieged and forced to submit to Beiming. Although they didn't know whether this matter was true or not, Yang Shindong's character had always been one that didn't offend others if they didn't offend him first. Since someone made a move against him first, he would definitely retaliate. This time, being able to take down Sure Wanshan and his 30,000 troops was a very obvious revenge. And all of this was thanks to the actions of Sure Hong, Tsingguang, and the others. Otherwise, if they wanted to achieve their goal, who knew how much time and price they would have to pay? After Sure Wanshan and the others made their decision, Ning Wenfeng took the initiative to find Su Dei. The two of them discussed for half the night and made two important decisions. First, the Five-Star Army would take the letter written by Sure Wanshan and the others to the Wangquan capital. The families of the three generals, the families of the main generals, and Deng Chong would be taken out of the city and brought to a safe place in the grasslands. Second, due to the strength of the Beiming army and the Walla army outside the city, the location of the battle would be changed to outside Mo Bay City. At that time, the Mo Bay Division would come to their aid. Although only 2 points were discussed, 1, it could solve the worries of the rear. 2, there was a way to perform meritorious deeds. It could be considered perfect. After waiting for Ning Wenfeng to return to the tent and explain the plan, early the next morning, Sure Wanshan appeared in the tent of Yesen, the leader of the Wara army. Yesen had just returned from a morning exercise when he heard the guard say that Sure Wanshan had come. He laughed and walked back to the tent. Knowing the purpose of Sure Wanshan's visit, Yesen of course had to be more enthusiastic. After all, Whether or not they could take down the solid walls of the Mo Bay Division was difficult for their cavalry. In the end, they still needed the Biming infantry. This was a stepping stone for him to perform meritorious deeds. The other party was also risking their lives. It was not too much to be enthusiastic. In the tent, Yesen warmly received the two sides could be said to have a good chat. When Shi Wanshan proposed that this time, not only did he have to bring 50,000 Biming infantry, he also had to bring the remaining 5,000 soldiers and 15,000 wounded soldiers. He said that this was the only way to ensure their determination. Yesen was naturally happy to accept. Not only that, Yesen also affirmed the determination of Shi Wanshan and the 5-star army to fight to the death. At the same time, he also promised that once Mo Bay Division was taken down, they would be credited with the most meritorious deed. He also promised that in the process, the Wara army would bear the cost of food. Seeing that Yesen had dispelled all his worries, Shi Wanshan naturally thanked him. In the end, they agreed to send out the troops 2 days later. He then walked out of the Wala camp. Seeing Shi Wanshan leave the tent, Yesen stopped smiling and began to calculate his own plan. Regarding what had happened in the northern Ming army, as an ally, they were naturally very clear about it since their camps were not far from each other. He did not believe that Shi Wanshan wanted to bring everyone along just to express his determination to fight to the death. However, at the same time, he did not think that Shi Wanshan would surrender to the 5-star army. In his opinion, it was because Shi Wanshan was worried that some people would target the soldiers he left behind after he left. That was why he had no choice but to make such a decision. Even when Shi Wanshan took the initiative to send out the troops 2 days later, Yesen also thought that he was afraid of being schemed against by the Biming army and had to leave in a hurry. It was because of this that when Shi Wanshan left the Biming army camp with 70,000 soldiers, no one raised any doubts. On the contrary, everyone looked at them with pity and pity. The only pity was that the one leading the troops in Wara wasn't their leader, Yesen, but one of his 4 generals, Hele. Yeshen's status and power today was inseparable from the 4 generals under his command. They were Tung Shu, Hele, Mutuk and Bomir. Tung Shu and Mutuk were killed by Yang Chendong in the battle against the 5-star army. Bomir had been leading the troops to stay in the Hanoi area. This was also the last path that Yesen had prepared for himself. Other than these 3, the only one he could feel at ease leading the troops alone was Hele. Chapter 1170. Hele led 100,000 Wala cavalry and Shi Wanshan's 70,000 infantrymen towards the North Desert City in the northwest direction of the first city. More than 100,000 men and horses were moving in a grandiose manner. It was a magnificent sight. However, all of this was not what Hele, the leading general, wanted to see. As cavalry, their advantage was that they were fast enough. When they charged, they could borrow the strength of their horses to increase their strength. But now, they were carrying 70,000 Biming infantrymen, especially 15,000 of them were wounded. Although these people were not seriously injured, their speed was too slow because of their injuries. They had already walked for 5 days, but they had only walked less than 100 miles. Moreover, they did not bring a lot of provisions. If they continued at this speed, they would not be able to reach Mo Bay City before they ran out of food. After hearing the situation of the army from the ration officer below, Hele looked for Shi Wanshan with a dark face and said with an unhappy face, "General Shi, your speed is too slow. The provisions we brought are too little. This is not like what you and our leader said, that we can march 50 miles a day." Facing Hele's dissatisfied questioning, Shi Wanshan said with a bitter face, "General I don't want to, but as you can see, we are only infantrymen. We don't have horses, and there are so many wounded people. We really can't walk fast. Why don't you leave some provisions and go first?" This. Hele listened to Shi Wanshan's words, and his eyes turned quickly. At the current speed, it was absolutely impossible to go to Mo Bay City and launch a surprise attack. Even the provisions would become the biggest hindrance to the army. And if they could leave these infantrymen here, Maybe they could really use a surprise attack to attack Mo Bay City. And if they only left a small amount of provisions, then these Biming infantrymen would have to move faster. Even if it couldn't be used as a surprise attack, it could still speed up the march of the troops. Hile quickly came up with an idea. He pretended to be reluctant and said, "All right, if that's the case, then this general will leave us some rations and go first. However, you have to be quick. Otherwise, if you are surrounded by the 5-star army, it will be really dangerous." Hile pretended to be concerned about Shi Wanshan and said such words. He left behind a part of the provisions for Shi Wanshan, and, at the same time, he left behind 5,000 cavalrymen. These soldiers weren't really there to protect them, but to prevent Biming's infantry from escaping if the situation turned bad. Hile, who thought that he had arranged everything well, led 950,000 Walla cavalry straight to North Desert City. However, he did not know that this step was equivalent to stepping into the gates of hell, and defeat was already set in stone. Shajing City. In the courtyard of the former New Second Army's military headquarters, Shi Bei was sleeping on a wooden chair in the courtyard. Since announcing his departure from the 5-star army and joining Biming, Commander Shi Bei had been drinking wine for food. Every day, he would get drunk. Most of the time, he would be carried to bed by his butler and bodyguards. The smell of alcohol on his body would never dissipate. In the first few days, Su Yuan would still have time to comfort him. He even brought Rong Xiao with him. He wanted to persuade Shi Bei to get back on his feet and work for the Biming army. But when he smelled the smell of alcohol, this idea became fainter and fainter. Until now, no one cared about him. It was as if he was leaving them to their own devices. Seeing that he was willing to live his life in a drunken stupor rather than serve the Northern Ming army, Rong Xiaoxing had the thought of killing him. However, Su Yuan stopped him. In his words, Shi Bei could not die now. The new Second Army still had 3 divisions that were not completely in their hands. If something happened to Shi Bei now, it would lead to a mutiny. The consequences would be unimaginable. Now, they could only wait for Shi Bei to wake up or die naturally from drinking. Regarding this, Rong Xiao naturally had a face full of displeasure. But during this period of time, he also learned that Shi Bei was a person who loved his soldiers as if they were his children. In the new Second Army, there had never been a case of embezzling provisions or soldiers' pay. So, many soldiers had deep feelings for this commander. If Bei really killed him, he was afraid that he would not be able to clean up this mess. So he gave up. At first, Rong Xiao and Su Yuan arranged for people to keep an eye on Shi Bei to prevent him from doing anything. But as the days went by, especially the 3 cavalry divisions of the new Second Army, they were forced to hand over their horses. After they changed from cavalry to infantry, their surveillance and supervision of Shi Bei became very lax. In the afternoon of this day, Shi Bei was still drunk as he collapsed on the wooden chair. When the housekeeper came in with 4 soldiers and saw him like this, he could not help but sigh. "Come, carry the general to his room to rest." Shi Bei was carried out of the courtyard as usual. The 4 Biming army soldiers in charge of surveillance saw this scene clearly from a big tree outside the courtyard. Then, they leaned against the tree trunk and dozed off. At first, they would follow him to take a look, but every time, he would get drunk and not wake up. Sometimes, he would even vomit everywhere, causing them to retch as well. Thus, they gave up on the idea of following him. In their opinion, this was just a repeat of yesterday's story. There was nothing interesting about a drunkard. As usual, they left after Shi Bei was carried to the big bed in the inner courtyard. But unlike before, the housekeeper did not leave this time. Instead, he gently patted Shi Bei's thigh 3 times and said, "Master, no one followed you. It's very safe now." She, who had been unconscious and drunk just a moment ago, suddenly opened her eyes. There was no sign of drunkenness in her clear eyes. Without needing anyone to help him, Shi Bei straightened his body and said to the housekeeper, "Is he here?" "Yes, he's in the basement." "Master, feel free to go. I'll hide here. Even if someone comes, they won't notice anything unless they're close." The housekeeper nodded. Then, Without waiting for Shi Bei to say anything, he was already lying on the bed. Then, he poured a jar of wine on his body. Immediately, the smell of wine filled the air and could be clearly smelled from 2 feet away. Looking at all of this, Shi Bei nodded in satisfaction. Then, he gently moved the bedside table, revealing a passageway that could fit 1 person. Then, his figure disappeared. There was a very secret basement in the general's residence. This was a highly confidential matter. Other than the housekeeper, even a former confidant like Su Yuan did not know about it. After Shi Bei entered the basement, he saw a candlelight lit inside. A figure was sitting at the table and reading a book. As if hearing the movement, the person began to turn around. Then his face was completely revealed in front of Shi Bei. After seeing the person's identity, Shi Bei's eyes were filled with joy. Even his footsteps could not help but quicken. At the same time, he stretched out his hands. Director Feng, why did you come here personally? The Director Feng that Shi Bei mentioned was the director of the security bureau in Shur City, Feng Liang. As they used to work in Shur City, the two of them were familiar with each other. 2 days ago, the housekeeper told him that a person who claimed to be from the other side had entered the residence as a vegetable seller. However, there had been no suitable opportunity, so Shi Bei asked the housekeeper to arrange for the person to be in the basement. Today, he finally had the chance to meet the person while the enemy was relaxed. He only knew that the person who came from the other side was not clear about the specific identity. He did not expect that the person who came was actually Feng Liang. How could Shi Bei not be excited? After so many days, he finally saw one of his own. Commander Shi, you've been wronged. As soon as he saw Shi Bei, Feng Liang chuckled. At the same time, he stretched out his hands to welcome Shi Bei. Just like that, for big hands were held tightly together. From their eyes, it could be seen that they were very excited. Feng Liang only said, "You've worked hard," which was enough to explain everything. It meant that they were very clear about Shi Bei's fake surrender, which saved a lot of effort. Thank you. Thank you for your trust in me, 6th young master. However, I've already written a letter of surrender, and it has been announced by Rong Xiao and the others. Could it be that the 6th young master? Shi Bei was very touched that Feng Liang still trusted him. However, his heart was not completely at ease. After all, if it were him, it would be impossible to say that he did not have a knot in his heart. Looking at Shi Bei's nervous expression, Feng Liang chuckled and said, "As expected, the 6th young master guessed correctly. He said in the telegram that as long as you say a few words to Shi Bei, he will understand. Do you want to listen to it now?" "Yes." Shi Bei nodded hurriedly. After he publicly surrendered to Baiming, the radio station was confiscated by Su Yuan. Shi Bei dared to do this because he knew that the other party would not use it at all. As long as he did not hand over the telegram interpreter, no matter how smart the other party was, they would not be able to understand the principle behind it. Because of this, he had not received any news from Yang Chendong for a long time. "Okay, then I'll recite it to you, Commander Shi Bei." The 6th young master said, "Don't doubt the people you use, and don't use the people you doubt. This is a kind of helplessness. Don't doubt the people you use, and use the people you doubt. This is a kind of state. The biggest challenge and breakthrough for a leader is to use people, and the biggest breakthrough for using people is to trust people. Please give these 2 words to Shi Bei. Go back and experience it." Imitating Yang Chendong's tone, Feng Liang Bei slowly recited it and seriously listened to Shi Bei's words. Even when there was no sound in the basement, he was still immersed in the aftertaste. With his intelligence, even though he could not completely understand the meaning behind these 2 words, he had already learned a lot from the literal understanding. At least the 6th young master still trusted him. Thank you, 6th young master, for still trusting me. But I don't know what I should do next." During this period of time, he had been pretending to drink wine every day, but he was also afraid of arousing suspicion, so he knew nothing about what was going on outside. However, he believed that since Feng Liang had taken the initiative to look for him, the environment and situation must have changed. Next, It should be time for him to be useful. Chapter 1171. There's indeed something that needs you to do. The sixth young master said that regardless of whether the surrender of Biming is true or not, at least the outside world believes it. If you want to change people's impression of you, there are some things that you have to do. How about this? I'll talk to you about the situation outside. For the rest of the time, Feng Liang talked nonstop. From time to time, he would interject a few words, and from time to time, he would listen attentively. The two of them met for more than 4 hours. If it weren't for the butler lying on the bed pretending to be asleep, and the fact that he usually pretended to be too good, the matter of him waking up would have been exposed. Beginning city. The attack was still going on. Moreover, with Tsingguang's continuous orders, the attack became stronger and stronger. Tsingguang would not love the soldiers as much as Shi Wanshan. In his eyes, these soldiers at the bottom were stepping stones to his glory. In order to achieve his goal, he would not care about the life and death of those people. After Tsingguang sent out a total of 5,000 people as the inspection team, the Northern Ming Empire's infantrymen under his command risked their lives and charged towards the inner city gate. Then, wave after wave of them rushed to their deaths, as if they wanted to open up a gap and rush into the city. In the city, the pressure was increasing. As the enemy's attack became more and more ferocious, the provisions in the city began to run out. Now, not only did the ordinary soldiers have no food to eat, but even the soldiers guarding the city could not eat a full meal. The situation was getting more and more critical day by day. As the stabilizing force of the beginning city, the new army commander, Tiger's Mane, was so thin that he was almost out of shape. His eyes were deeply sunken in. Compared to the others, not only was he hungry, but he was also under great psychological pressure. Before Yang Qindong left, he handed over the military and political power of the beginning city to him. Usually, he gave him so much support and trust. If he could not defend the beginning city, how could he still have the face to meet others? Commander, the Biming army's attack is too fierce. Now our soldiers are losing a lot of people. Most of them are hungry. The original 70,000 infantry soldiers are now less than 10,000 people. Even they can't hold on. Tomorrow at most, no. After tonight, I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on. Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, who was temporarily in charge of the defense of the city, was reporting the current military situation to Tiger's Mane in the 1st Army headquarters in the city. Can it only last for tonight? A hint of sadness flashed across Hu Meng's face. He now had tens of thousands of infantry and cavalry, but because of the lack of food, they could not form enough combat power. If this continued, even if the number of troops was large, it would be useless. Yes, if the Northern Ming army continues to attack tonight, I'm afraid that by tomorrow morning, we won't be able to hold on. Lu Zhua's eyes were filled with helplessness as he spoke. Since the Biming army changed its commander, Tsingguang had adopted a 24-hour nonstop attack method. This also doubled the pressure on the defenders of the beginning city. Young master, where is the young master? He did not ask about the situation of Lu Zhua's army, nor did he cheer him up. Without food, it was useless to say more. Well, the telegraph operator has sent a telegram, but he still can't be contacted. Lu Zhua lowered his head and said, "He can't be contacted? How is this possible? Didn't the young master leave the Liaodong region long ago and come here? How can he not be contacted? Someone, go and find Division Commander Yang Si." This result was obviously not what Tiger's Mane wanted to hear. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, he thought of Yang Si, the person who was personally appointed by the young master to manage the money and food. He did not believe that at this time, the other party would not leave any room for maneuver. The soldier agreed and walked out, but before he could leave the hospital, he saw Division Commander Yang Si had already stepped into the courtyard leisurely. "Division Commander Yang Si, our military commander is looking for you. You should go quickly." When he saw Yang Si, it was as if he had seen a relative, and the soldier said anxiously, "What's wrong? Is Tigerhead anxious?" "Haha, when encountering a big matter, you have to be calm. Calm down." With a smile on his face, Yang Si said as he strode into the main hall. Yangtze appeared in front of him so quickly with a smile, which made Tiger's mane very angry. Yangtze, you can still smile at this time. How can you be so heartless? Do you know that once the beginning city is breached, you also have a lot of responsibility? The beginning city will be breached? Don't joke around. This place is guarded by our most powerful division, Commander Tiger's Mane. No one can attack it, Yangtze said with a playful expression and flattered with a smile. If Yangtze said this in the past, Tiger's Mane would definitely laugh and scold him. Everyone would just treat it as a joke and let it go. But now, Yangtze still had such an attitude. Tiger's Mane was furious on the spot. Yangtze, be serious. I can tell you that this is the new military headquarters. No one is joking with you. Tiger's Mane's face was red as he scolded angrily. Yangtze could also see that the other party was anxious. He immediately returned to normal and said, Tiger's Mane, don't be anxious. I just received a telegram from the young master. How can I not be anxious? Wait, what did you just say? You received a telegram from the young master? Tiger's Mane, who was about to get angry, was suddenly stunned. Then, he stared at Yangtze with wide eyes as if he wanted to eat him. It was as if he was afraid that Yangtze was joking with him. Yangtze also knew when to joke and when to be extremely serious, so he nodded heavily. Yes, I received a telegram from the young master. The young master is on his way to the beginning city. He already knows about our situation, so he ordered me to take out food to solve the problem at hand first. Everything else can be settled in half a month. Half a month? Take out food? You still have food? Tiger's Mane was extremely surprised when he heard this. His eyes were filled with endless expectations when he looked at Yangtze. Of course I do, but it's only enough for the army and the civilians to eat for half a month. This is also the reason why I haven't taken it out before, Yangtze said seriously. At the same time, he gave an explanation for not taking out food. Originally, Tiger's Mane wanted to scold Yangtze for not taking out food when he had it. However, when he heard it now, he knew that this question was unnecessary. No wonder compared to others, Yangtze always looked unhurried. It seemed that he had the confidence to do so. Thinking of this, Tiger's Mane could not help but ask, You're telling me this because you know that the defending army can't hold on any longer, right? If we can hold on, will you still not tell me? Yes. Yangtze did not deny it. Although he was confident and seemed to be more unhurried than anyone else, he was always paying attention to the situation of the battle. He also knew that the 5-star army, without food, was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Therefore, he quickly sent a telegram to Yang Qindong to ask for instructions. After receiving a definite reply, he went to the new army headquarters. After making the promise, Yangtze saw that Tiger's Mane's face was a little ugly. Although he was under Yang Qindong's instructions this time, he did not want to affect the relationship between the two. Therefore, he explained, Tiger's Mane, don't be angry with me. This is all young master's idea. Long before the last time he left the city, he secretly dug a large cellar in the Yang residence with Longwei. You also know that the quality of the soil here is quite good. Many of the vegetables and grains are stored here to be preserved. This is young master's preparation for a rainy day. So, young master already predicted that this day would come? Tiger's Mane stood up in surprise. That should be the case. Actually, I only found out about it not long ago. It was the young master who told me in a secret message. Now that I think about it, if this matter was really announced earlier, then we would at most be able to eat for a few more days. If we want to cooperate with the young master to launch an all-out counterattack, we won't have the strength to do so. Yangtze nodded and said. Tiger's Mane did not hear the other words clearly, but the words all-out counterattack clearly entered his ears. This made him instantly energized. Wait, you're saying that we have to cooperate with the young master to launch an all-out counterattack? Yes, that's what the young master said in the telegram. He also asked me to take out all the food in the cellar and distribute it to the soldiers and the people so that everyone can gradually recover their strength and be ready to go out of the city to counterattack at any time. Yangtze nodded heavily, then took out a telegram that he had just received from his arms and placed it in front of Tiger's Mane's desk. As for the siege army outside the city, they had no idea what was going on inside the city. Since the first city was surrounded, no one could walk out of the city, and no one could walk in from outside the city. The news was completely cut off. At dusk, Tsingguang was mobilizing the soldiers. Although he was greedy, he still had some ability to fight. He had keenly felt that the 5-star army guarding the city was an arrow at the end of its flight. He decided to launch another wave of fierce attacks to break through the tower and enter the first city. Not only did Tsingguang mobilize the soldiers below, but he also reported his speculation to Admiral Shi Hung and the others at the same time. After hearing that the first city was about to be breached, Shi Hung separately called for Fang Dingshan and Yesen and asked their cavalry to prepare to open the city gate and charge into the city. Both of you, the first city is a flag of Bugnam of Gojoseon in the grassland. According to our previous investigation, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the city. The army in the city is also the best of the best. Once the city gate is breached, they won't be captured without putting up a fight. At that time, we'll have to see how powerful your cavalry is. Shi Hang's gaze kept moving between the two of them. Please don't worry, Admiral. With the Liaodong cavalry here, we won't let any enemy escape. Fang Dingshan patted his chest and promised. Yes, our Walla cavalry wants to have a good fight with the elites of the 5-star army, Yesen said with a slightly arrogant expression. Chapter 1172. In the past, when he fought against a 5-star army, when had he ever had the upper hand? Now, he could finally pick on a soft persimmon. He had heard that there was no more food in the city, and the soldiers were all skin and bones from hunger. How could such an army have any fighting strength? If he didn't bully such an opponent, who would? The two cavalry generals were so confident. When Shi Hung heard this, he naturally laughed out loud in joy. Good. Since it's like this, Marquis can rest assured. Then let's wait for General Tsingguang's good news. Tsingguang was under a lot of pressure before. He was afraid that the Walla army would turn against him after the victory, so General Sun Hong was ordered to return to Shaanxi to set up defenses. Now that he had the authority to command the troops, he felt both glory and pressure. Fortunately, the 5-star army in the city was not strong enough, which gave him new hope. Seeing that victory was right in front of him, and this was going to be a great achievement, Tsingguang did not feel sleepy at all. His eyes were shining, and he was very excited. Unfortunately, the battle didn't end as quickly as he had imagined. At dawn, the 5-star army in the city actually counterattacked and forced the Biming soldiers who had taken down the city walls with great difficulty back down. Tsingguang was naturally enraged when he saw such an outcome. He immediately gave the order to continue attacking. No matter what, the 5-star army in the city didn't have any food. If he didn't use this opportunity to defeat them, he probably wouldn't have another chance in the future. When Shi Hung, who didn't receive any good news the entire night, sent someone to ask what was going on, he used the excuse that it was the 5-star army's final radiance of the setting sun as an excuse. However, he had a bad feeling in his heart. Even the result that he thought would be a sure win had an accident. Could it be that the 5-star army in the city had other tricks up their sleeves? If that was the case, why did he appear so weak and powerless a while ago? Tsingguang couldn't think of it, and neither could most of the others. However, there were some who knew, such as Su Dei, who had been promoted to a major and was trusted by Tsingguang. Just last night, when all the siege troops were excitedly waiting for the news of the opening of the city gate, he took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to him to secretly meet the Yang CS Security Bureau personnel. The subordinate sent by Director Feng Liang gave a brief summary of the tasks that Su Dei had to complete. General Su, you've done a good job in dealing with Shirwan Shan and the others. Bugnam of Gojoseon is very happy, but he hopes that you can stop being arrogant and make new contributions. When the day comes that you return, Bugnam of Gojoseon will personally celebrate with you. Hearing that Yang Qindong valued him so much, Su Dei was very excited. Please tell Bugnam of Gojoseon that I will do my best and will not let him down. The spy left, and Su Dei began to seriously think about how to complete the latest task. He thought about what the spy said about instigating the relationship between Baiming and the Walla army. He fell into deep thought. Mo Bay City. He led the cavalry day and night in order to launch a surprise attack. When they were about 10 miles away from the city, the scouts sent out from the front brought back good news. The 4 gates of Mo Bay City were wide open, and there was no defense at all. The scouts even saw people walking back and forth at the city gate, as usual. To be able to become one of the 4 generals, Hele was not only very brave, but also very smart. When he fought, he was not only brave, but also cautious. Even though the scout had reported, he was still a little worried. He arranged for the cavalry to enter the city and contact the Wara spies in the city to make sure that there was no ambush in Mo Bay City. The scout dismounted and changed into the clothes of the Mongolian people. He then walked towards a gate. Hele saw all of this, and his eyes flashed with excitement. He only had to wait for the scout to say that there was no problem in the city and set off a fire as a signal. He would then lead the cavalry into the city with full force. Then the great achievement would be in front of him. Under Hele's watchful eyes, the scouts successfully entered the city and disappeared from the city gate. About an hour later, a thick smoke rose from the city. This was the signal that they had discussed before. "Ha, it's done. Come, let's charge together. Victory is in front of us." Hele excitedly jumped onto his warhorse and shouted to his subordinates. Then, nearly 100,000 cavalrymen let out an earth-shattering roar and began to appear from the forest 3 miles away, launching a fierce attack towards the east gate of Mo Bay. With the sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground, the east gate of Mo Bay City was already in a panic. The soldiers guarding the gate were quickly closing the gate. The people who had set up stalls at the gate were running in panic. They did not even have time to clean up the things on the ground. "Ha, go, go, go." Hele's eyes were filled with excitement. He did not expect that this sneak attack would be so successful. Mo Bay City did not even have the slightest bit of defense. This was a great opportunity given to him by God. He must seize it. Hele's movements were very fast. Under his constant urging, nearly 100,000 Walla cavalry rushed forward like a gust of wind. From afar, it looked like a black tornado. No one dared to look directly at it. As the horses galloped, they were getting closer and closer to the east gate of Mo Bay City. 2 miles, 1 mile, when the patterns on the walls of the gate were clearly visible to the naked eye, even the gate that was closing was only 1/6 of the way closed. The terrified eyes of the 5-star army soldiers were infinitely magnified. All of the Walla cavalry were shouting excitedly. They seemed to see countless money, women, and power waving at them. Everything was beautiful in front of them. As long as they rushed through the gate that was not closed, everything would be theirs. Without any defense, once they entered the city, no one would be a match for nearly 100,000 cavalrymen. At that time, even if the 5-star army gathered together, they would not have the ability to turn the situation around. When that time came, they would be able to defeat them one by one. Many of the Walla cavalry had a joyful expression on their faces. They were shouting all kinds of things and waving the sabers in their hands nonstop. They were as fast as flying. They came from afar to take the victory that was about to be in their hands. Plop, 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 plop. Just when the situation seemed to be settled, an unexpected scene occurred. A huge pit appeared in front of them. The pit was more than 100 feet long and several feet deep. It was like a beast that devoured people's hearts. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed the unprepared Walla cavalry into its mouth. They fell into the huge pit. The sudden scene caught the Walla cavalry off guard. In just one move, at least 1,000 cavalrymen fell into the pit and could not climb back up. However, the Walla cavalry was a branch of the Mongolian cavalry and was one of the strongest. They grew up on horseback and were known as the people who lived on horseback. To be able to join the Walla cavalry, it was not an exaggeration to say that they were all elites. Seeing this sudden change, many cavalrymen used their superb riding skills to force their war horses to stop. Unfortunately, there were too many cavalrymen. Seeing that a great achievement was in front of them, everyone wanted to do something. There was almost no one who was first or last. Everyone was giving it their all. When the horses in front of them stopped, the cavalrymen behind them did not know what was happening in front of them. They continued to charge forward. Under the situation where there was no way to retreat, more and more of the wall of cavalry were squeezed into the pit and became a part of the human flesh pile. Chon was closer to the front and almost fell into the horse trap. When he realized that the situation was not right, he had already stopped his horse. At the same time, he saw a scene that made him angry. His own cavalrymen had squeezed their own cavalrymen into the pit. This kind of loss and death for no reason made him furious. He loudly shouted for everyone to retreat. However, there were too many cavalrymen and the situation was very chaotic. His shouts had long been drowned out by the cries of alarm. "Bastard, bastard, men, blow the horn to retreat, retreat." In a moment of desperation, called for a guard beside him and had him blow the horn to order the army to retreat. At this time, this action was undoubtedly the right one. Shouts could be drowned out, but the horn would not stop. After hearing the bugle horn for the entire army to retreat, although many of the cavalrymen who rushed over were confused, they still stopped their war horses and began to turn their horses around and retreat. Seeing that the dangerous situation had been stopped, patted his chest in fear. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, an even more shocking scene occurred. Countless cavalrymen with colorful 5-star flags suddenly appeared in North Desert City. There were so many of them that it was too much for the eyes to take in. Then, they were like a dark cloud pressing down from the heavens. Although they were still far away, the sound of arrows piercing through the air could be heard. If both sides were to clash, would not be afraid of any opponent. He had close to 100,000 cavalrymen. Even if they were to clash head-on, he would not be at a disadvantage. What was worse was that he had just given the order to retreat. Now that his cavalrymen were retreating, it would take some time for him to turn his horse around and charge again. It was obvious that the 5-star cavalrymen would not give them such a chance. He finally realized that everything was just a trap and ambush set up by the 5-star army. However, who was slow to realize, could no longer form a joint force among the cavalrymen to counterattack. At this moment, there was only one thing he could do, and that was to retreat. Retreat as far as possible. Only by increasing the distance between both sides could he have the chance to regroup. Chapter 1173. Retreat, all retreat. had no choice but to give the order to retreat. This time, it was not a temporary retreat, but a mad retreat. It was a competition of speed. From Bay City, 20,000 Mabe army and 50,000 Mongolian cavalry charged out. The 20,000 Mabe army was naturally a ranking military force. Their strength was almost enough to reach the second rank. As for the 50,000 Mongolian cavalry beside them, their true strength was probably not even a third-rank cavalry. This was because they were made up of young Mongolian men who wanted to kill the enemy, but had not gone through any formal training. Their strength was not as good as the enemy. This made Bay Division Commander Xian Honghai and Deputy Commander Na Ri Song very distressed. Their strength was not as good as the enemy. They could only rely on the walls of Bay City. This was the natural barrier that blocked the Wala cavalry. They had already made preparations to defend the city, but everything changed because of Yang Qindong's telegram. After Xian Honghai and Na Ri Song saw the contents of the telegram, they were overjoyed and immediately made preparations. Just like when saw the gates of Bay City open, it was just an illusion. In reality, everyone in the city was under control. The people who appeared in front of them were just normal Bay soldiers in disguise. This was also the reason why spies were able to light up the fireworks as soon as they entered the city. It was all because in the controlled North Desert City, there would not be any unfamiliar faces at all. As soon as the scouts sent by entered the city where they could not see, he was caught by Xian Honghai and the others. Under the condition that one of his arms was cut off, he learned of his mission. This caused the smoke to rise, which completely dispelled Hilei's last doubts. The horse trap had been dug long ago. After countless changes, Xian Honghai and Nari Song came to the conclusion that the best time to attack was when the enemy turned around and retreated. In other words, if Ilay had been willing to let the army continue to charge forward, the horse trap would have eventually been filled. At that time, Exine Hong Hai and the others would have had no choice but to face the Walla army head-on. No one could say for sure whether they would have won or lost. Fortunately, Ilay was a general who loved his soldiers and made a decision that was beneficial to the Mabe army. Because of this, he was hunted down. Chase, don't stop, and don't give them any chance to fight back. Exine Hong Hai's shout reached the ears of all the cavalrymen through the messenger's roar. The pursuit began. They did their best to catch up, not giving Ilay a chance to stop his horse and turn around. No matter how strong a cavalry unit was, if they were not given the opportunity and distance to charge, they would not be able to display their advantage. Under the pursuit, the Walla cavalry could not even display 30% of their usual strength. Occasionally, some cavalrymen who were about to be caught up tried to fight back, but in the end, because there were too few of them, their strength was too weak, and they were drowned by the Mabe and Mongolian cavalrymen and died regretfully. Ilay, who was running among the troops, would occasionally look back. When he saw his soldiers being caught up and killed by the enemy cavalry, he was naturally furious. But he knew very well that there was nothing he could do. He had lost the initiative, and the army was in the process of fleeing. He had no way to fight back. Even if he gave the order, or even if he led his troops to charge back, it would be a suicide mission. There was no better way. He could only run, and hope that they could use their better horsemanship to escape the enemy's pursuit. At that time, he would gather his main force and charge back. He could already see that the Mabe army and Mongolian troops chasing him were not that strong, and were far inferior to the elite Walla cavalry. If they were to fight head-on, he had at least an 80% chance of winning. One side ran, the other side chased, and the distance of 100 miles was covered in a few hours. With the passage of time, the distance between the two sides continued to widen. It was already difficult for the cavalrymen to catch up to the enemy and be hacked to death by a flurry of blades. Ilay breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he calculated the distance between the two sides. Once he felt that the distance was far enough, and he could launch a counterattack, he would be the first to stop his horse. That would be the time for him to teach the enemy a lesson. Ilay was still waiting for an opportunity, but how could he know that the opportunity did not exist for him at all? This was because when they had run around 120 li and were about to open up enough distance to counterattack, they had already arrived at a place 50 li away from the Three Peaks Mountain. Just as they reached the side of the mountain, arrows were shot out, hitting the vanguard of the cavalry. For a moment, the arrows fell like rain, and the horses lost their footing. The sudden attack caught the Walla army off guard. After losing thousands of cavalry, even more cavalry rushed out of the forest, holding bright 5-star flags. The leader was the Far Eastern Army's commander, Chunbo. When Ilay and his army passed by the Three Peaks Mountain, Chunbo had already led the 40,000 cavalry to gather here. However, he did not immediately charge out. Instead, he followed Yang Qindong's instructions and waited for the enemy to be defeated so that he could intercept them on the way back. Everything was as Yang Qindong had expected. Ilay had been tricked and was defeated. When they arrived at the foot of the Three Peaks Mountain, it was time for Chunbo to beat a drowning dog. The sudden appearance of the 40,000 cavalry carrying the 5-star army's flag was like a heavy hammer to the chest, dealing a heavy blow to the Walla cavalry. If it was said that they had the advantage of numbers before, then with the appearance of the Far Eastern Army, the difference in numbers between the two sides had undergone a qualitative change. Out of the 95,000 cavalrymen, they had lost at least 10,000 during their escape. In addition to the surprise attack by the Far East Army, they had lost another 5,000 cavalrymen, leaving them with less than 80,000 soldiers. Naturally, there was a gap between them and the 5-star Corps, which had 110,000 soldiers. Their numbers were inferior, and they had fallen into the enemy's trap. At this moment, Ilay felt like he could not cry out to the heavens. At this moment, any action of fighting would only be sending them to their deaths. The only thing they could do now was to escape, and to continuously escape. Retreat, don't continue fighting, retreat. Hilei's heart was dripping blood as he shouted loudly. His personal guards were constantly blowing the bugle horn to retreat. After losing more than 10,000 riders, the Walla cavalry finally broke out of the encirclement and continued to flee to the east. Chase! The two generals, Xian Honghai and Chen Bo, did not hesitate at all and decisively gave the order to continue the chase. For them, the battle had just begun. With Chen Bo's far eastern army blocking the way, the distance between the two sides was once again shortened. The Walla cavalry was beaten until they were scared witless. When they could finally see the 70,000 Baiming army infantry led by Shi Wanshan, there were less than 70,000 cavalry left. From afar, Hilei saw many figures in front of him. He saw the Baiming dragon flag raised high, and he also saw the 5,000 Walla cavalry guarding the Baiming dragon flag. Ah, the heavens are helping me. Hilei laughed loudly. When he saw the Baiming army infantry, he seemed to see a new hope. With the help of these infantry, it was enough to buffer the enemy. That way, he would have the opportunity to reorganize his army and launch a counterattack. He swore that this time, he would chase down the 5-star army cavalry and flatten North Desert City. He would even massacre the entire city. He wanted to tell everyone what the consequences of angering the Walla cavalry were. Quick, prepare the bows and arrows. Stop the 5-star army cavalry. Hilei kept increasing the speed of his horse. Although his mount was almost at its limit, he did not feel the slightest bit of heartache. He just wanted to be one step ahead and tell the Baiming army to get ready. Then he would launch a full counterattack. As expected of one of the 4 generals chosen by Yesen, Hilei's horse was extremely fast. He was at least 30 meters ahead of the messenger and rushed to the front of the Baiming army. Following these shouts, countless soldiers of the Baiming army raised the bows in their hands. A murderous aura came from them. Facing the scene of tens of thousands of cavalry waiting to be shot, Hilei was not only not afraid, but also excited. These were all his allies, his friends. Next, he just needed to wait for the arrows to pass and disrupt the enemy's pursuit formation. Then, it will be time for them to launch a full counterattack. Hilei still had a smile on his face. He did not notice that a general of the Baiming army was aiming a strong bow at him. This person was General Ancient River. He had fought with the Walla cavalry countless times. He did not know how many soldiers and trusted generals had died in their hands. This hatred was not something that could be erased by the Emperor's decree or by the fact that both sides were allies. Previously, he was thinking about the big picture. Even if he wanted to, he could not do anything excessive. But now, he was a member of the 5-star army. It was reasonable for him to make a move now. At the same time, it was also a great achievement. The arrow kept moving, aiming at Hilei's chest, who had stopped his horse with a smile on his face. Then, his left hand that was holding the arrow's tail loosened. The arrow with the iron tip made a sound as it pierced through the air and flew towards Hilei's chest. Ha! Ugh! While he was still laughing and imagining the scene of victory in his mind, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, before he could react, he felt a pain in his chest. The arrow's tail was still shaking as it pierced through his chest. This was precisely the arrow shot by Gu He. It hit the target, the unguarded Hilei's chest. Hilei had never thought that this would be the result. He lowered his head and saw the red blood coming out of his chest. Hilei used all his strength to point at the Baiming army. With a plop, he fell off his horse. One of the 4 generals that Yesen valued the most, Hilei, closed his eyes and followed in the footsteps of Tung Shu and Mu Tu'er. Hilei died like this in front of all the Walla cavalry. This scene shocked them so much that many soldiers could not help but stop. They did not even realize that they were surrounded by the Far Eastern Army, Mabe Army, and Mongolian Army. Chapter 1174. There were also some cavalrymen who quickly recovered from their shock. The first thing they did was to run away. The Baiming army had rebelled. They had actually joined forces with the 5-star army to deal with the Walla army. This news must be reported to Yesen, Otherwise, they would suffer a great loss. But how could it be so easy to escape at this moment? Not to mention the 70,000 infantrymen of Biming in front of them and the 110,000 five-star army cavalrymen behind them. The 5,000 Walla cavalrymen that were originally in charge of guarding the Biming army had already been taken down by Shi Huanshan and the others. Now these cavalrymen were replaced by the Biming army. Stop them. Don't let a single one of them escape. Also, don't spread the news that Biming and the five-star army have joined forces. General Shi Huanshan, who was riding on a horse, took off the Vala cavalry uniform he was using to disguise himself as he shouted loudly. Under Shi Huanshan's command, such shouts could be heard everywhere on the battlefield. It could be said that everyone knew that Biming had joined forces with the five-star army. All of this made Chun Bo, Exine Hong Hai, and the others very anxious. Quick, seal the battlefield. Don't let a single enemy escape. If anyone doesn't surrender, kill them. After the military order was given, no matter if it was the Far Eastern Army, the Mabe Army, or the Mongolian cavalrymen, they began to move faster and faster. If any Walla cavalry refused to surrender, they would be killed without mercy. The entire battlefield was suddenly filled with rivers of blood. The already dark green grassland was covered with a layer of bright red. From afar, it was very eye-catching and dazzling. Arrows flew, sabers danced, weapons collided, people flew and horses fell. The so-called most precious life was clearly worthless at this moment. One by one, the resisting Walla cavalry were overturned and turned into fertilizer for the grassland, forever buried here. This battle lasted until noon of the second day. The sun hung high in the sky. Only then did the dust settle and the clamor slowly die down. The ground was covered with the corpses of the dead Walla cavalry, as well as the flags that they were once proud of. But at this moment, those flags were already in tatters, as if they were telling the cruelty and difficulty of this battle. There were a total of 100,000 Walla cavalrymen. Nearly 30,000 of them were killed and 70,000 were captured. Unfortunately, hundreds of cavalrymen took advantage of the night to escape. When this result was reported to General Chun Bo, Exine Hong Hai, and Shi Huanshan, they couldn't help but look at each other and laughed. Hundreds of cavalrymen ran away. I believe this news will definitely reach Yeshin's ears. Exine Hong Hai thought of the military order issued by Yang Chendong. At first, he felt a little embarrassed. After all, 100,000 Walla cavalry were coming. It was very difficult to defeat them, let alone kill them all and spread the news. But now, it seemed that the mission was completed just like that. Although his side also paid a certain price in this battle. For example, thousands of Mongolian cavalrymen died, and more than 5,000 Biming cavalrymen died. But compared to the results of the battle, there was no doubt that it was a great victory. Definitely. Okay, next, the task of cleaning the battlefield will be handed over to General Shi. Commander Exine, we still have to hurry to the beginning city. Chun Bo's face also showed a satisfied smile. But he didn't forget that this was only half of the mission. The most important step in this battle was to meet the beginning city. Well said. Generals, take care. Shi Huanshan also knew that it was impossible for his infantry to maintain the same speed as the cavalrymen. But just as Shi Huanshan's voice fell, a rider came from not far away. The rider was dressed in silver armor. It was Shi Huanshan's deputy, Ancient River. Generals, I also want to go to the battlefield with you to kill the enemy, but please help me. Ancient River, don't make trouble, Shi Huanshan shouted when he saw that Ancient River wanted to interfere. General, I'm not making trouble. This time, we seized a lot of Walla cavalry's horses. I have just mobilized 10,000 soldiers. As long as they are given horses, they are willing to kill the enemy with me. General, how many small shoes did those people put on us before? Now is the time for us to take revenge. Gu, he said with his eyes wide open, as if he was unwilling to admit defeat. Seeing that Ancient River was determined, Chun Bo looked at him with appreciation. Not bad. You are a tiger, General. I think you can do it. Come, bring me a commander's cloak. The bodyguard immediately found a large black cloak, and Chun Bo personally handed it to Ancient River. General Ancient, to be able to wear a cloak of this level, you are at least a commander in the 5-star army. I believe you'll not disgrace it. Thank you. Ancient River was excited. He stretched out his hands and took it. With a shake of his hands, the cloak spread with the wind and hung on his body. Then he looked at Sir Wanshan with excitement and said, General, do you think I am awe-inspiring? Awe-inspiring. Looking at Ancient River's attire, Sir Wanshan knew that he could not stop him. In addition, Commander Chun Bo also expressed his opinion, so he could not stop him. He rode his horse forward and patted Ancient River's shoulder, saying, Be careful. To be able to fight together with the 5-star army, is my fortune. General, don't worry. The news of victory will come soon. Ha ha. Guhi laughed heartily as he turned around and left. He wanted to tell this good news to his 10,000 cavalry brothers. Chunbo, Exine Honghai, and the others also left very quickly. Looking at the back view of over 100,000 cavalry soldiers leaving, Ning Wenfeng walked to Sir Wanshan's side and said, General Ancient River is leading the vanguard for us. This is a good thing for us. Of course, I know that he wants to gain more battle merits, so that we can have more room for improvement after joining the 5-star army. I also know that ever since we paid 300,000 taels of silver for him, he's been under a lot of psychological pressure. However, there are always casualties in a war. I just hope that he can come back safely. Sir Wanshan sighed and said. Ning Wenfeng nodded heavily. We have been through many trials and tribulations. We have to believe in Brother Ancient River. He will definitely be fine. In the Biming Army's barracks at the foot of the Origin City, under the continuous siege, not only was the Origin City not broken, but it seemed to be more solid. At least the 5-star army in the city resisted more than before. This rather unusual action made many people very surprised and also had a feeling of puzzlement. Su Dei, like many generals, often showed a thoughtful expression. However, everyone didn't know that his thoughts were different from everyone else. He had been thinking about how to complete the task given by Yang Chendong and how to instigate the relationship between the Biming army and the Walla army. As usual, he walked out of his tent. Unlike some people who like to think about things behind closed doors, Su Dei liked to look around and keep walking to find the answer to the question. Perhaps no one in the entire barracks knew better than him what happened in the grassland of the North Desert 3 days ago. Who would have thought that 100,000 Walla cavalry would be defeated like this? In the end, only a few hundred of them escaped. This would be a big earthquake and completely tear apart the alliance between the Biming army and the Wara army. This was undoubtedly something that the 5-star army hoped to see. Now, what he needed to do was to not give the two sides a chance to argue. Thinking and walking, he unconsciously came to the junction between the Biming army and the Wara army. What he saw was the Walla cavalry cooking. The smell of meat was still far away, but it already drifted over. When the smell entered his nose, Su Dei instinctively twitched his nose. Then an idea came, which made the corners of his mouth curl up slightly. And on the same night, the important place where the Biming army stored grain and fodder suddenly caught fire. Although it didn't involve too much grain because of the timely rescue, it still scared the admiral, Marquis Wokinghao, Shihong. The grain was sufficient, but it was so laborious to attack the first city. He really didn't dare to imagine how the war would go on without grain and fodder. Therefore, in the general tent, after he severely punished the grain officer 50 times, he ordered people to investigate the matter to see what caused the fire. Shihong even had a thought. Could the fire be set by the 5-star army? The general was angry, and the efficiency of the people under him was much faster. Just at dawn the next day, the general sent to investigate reported that someone saw 2 Walla soldiers appear around the grain storage last night. This news made Shihong's face change greatly. Is the news reliable? Did the 2 people catch them? Reporting back to Marquis, no. You also know that we are allies now. Besides, it was dark at that time, and I didn't see their faces clearly. I only recognized them as Walla soldiers from their clothes. The general in charge of the investigation bowed his head and answered. But he would never have thought that the two shadows were just Su Dei and his most trusted soldiers in disguise. This was also the simplest way that Su Dei thought of to drive a wedge between the two armies. Shi Hung didn't know this. What he now learned was that Walla's soldiers wanted to set fire to his grain and fodder. What did they want to do? Did they want to fall out with him? Come, immediately invite General Fong and General Ng. This was a matter of great importance, and it was far from what he could decide alone. He now needed to find someone to discuss what to do if this matter was true. After a while, Liaodong General Fong Dingshan and Datong Vice Chief Xin Guang appeared in the general tent. The two of them learned the truth of the matter from Shi Hung. "No way, we are allies now," Xin Guang exclaimed after hearing the news. Obviously, he never thought of this result. Allies? That's only for now, not in the past or in the future. Fong Dingshan looked indifferent and didn't seem to be surprised. Chapter 1175. General Fong, what do you mean? Shi Hung looked at Fong Dingshan's expression and asked in a puzzled tone, but his expression was natural. It was obvious that he was thinking the same thing. What else? If it weren't for the five-star army, we would have been mortal enemies with the Walla cavalry. The reason why we joined forces is because the current five-star army is easier to bully. Once they are eliminated, I'm afraid that our cooperation will end. It's inevitable that we will fall out. After Fong Dingshan said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Shi Hung and Xin Guang. He didn't believe that these two people didn't think of this. In fact, Shi Hung had already received the decree of the Daizong Emperor. He could join forces with the Wara army, but it was only a limited alliance. He had to be prepared to fall out with them at any time. After all, when it came to hatred, the hatred between the two sides was far greater than the hatred between Baiming and Yang Qindong. In the past, the Wara army used to harvest grain at the border of the Great Ming grassland. Now that the Great Ming dynasty was divided into the north and the south, they were the initiators. Not long ago, Fong Dingshan led 70,000 Liaodong cavalry to harvest grain in the Wara army's territory, killing their people and stealing their livestock. It was impossible to say that there was no hatred in everyone's heart. Shi Hung was naturally very clear about these things. He knew that the hatred between the two sides was already irreconcilable, but there was one thing he couldn't figure out. Why did the Wara army choose to attack them at this time? Did they want to join forces to deal with the five-star army? Shi Hung raised the question in his heart and then looked at Fong Dingshan, wanting to see what the other party thought. "Marquis, don't look at me. The reason why they did this is probably because they think that we can't take down the first city. Since that's the case, our allied forces will have to disperse sooner or later. If they can cause us some trouble at this time, that's naturally good. By the way, Marquis, please don't forget that the Shajing city and Jingzhou city that we're occupying used to belong to the Tile tribe." Speaking of this matter, Fong Dingshan did not even hesitate. It was clear that he was not optimistic about this alliance. This had a lot to do with Fong Dingshan's personality. He was originally a very arrogant person. In his eyes, only Baiming was orthodox. The five-star army, the World Wara, and even the Southern Ming dynasty would all submit to Baiming soon. His mission was to conquer them, defeat them, and establish an immortal achievement. With such thoughts in mind, he had long regarded everyone as his enemy. In that case, it would be normal for the enemy to do anything to harm him. There was nothing strange or suspicious about it. If these thoughts were known by Su Dei, he would be very happy. This proved that his plan to sow discord had succeeded. "You're right. It seems that we have to be careful of them. By the way, General Xin, how confident are you in taking down the first city?" Shi Hung nodded in agreement. What Fong Dingshan said was roughly the same as what he thought. However, there was one difference. In his eyes, the five-star army was a bigger enemy. No matter how strong the World Wara was, they were only able to move freely on the grassland. In contrast, Bugnam of Gojoseon had the ability to penetrate the hinterland of Baiming. This was what he needed to guard against the most. When he thought of Bugnam of Gojoseon, it reminded him of the first city. You want to know how confident he was in taking down the first city? It should be soon. This time, Guang was not as confident as before. It was not because of anything else. It was because the difficulty of attacking the city had increased over the past few days. The five-star army that was guarding the city seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They began to regain their vitality and were not as easy to deal with as they were in the beginning. However, with the advantage of besieging the city, he firmly believed that the other party would not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, it was certain that they would be able to take down the city, provided that they had enough time. Then let's speed up. Shi Hung did not intend to urge Guang. These days, the momentum of the siege was still very fierce. As the commander, he knew very well in his heart. Of course, he did not know that there was not much time left for him. By the way, General Fong, what do you think we should do next against the World War? Shi Hung did not forget the purpose of asking the two of them to discuss this matter. What else can we do? We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. In the future, we will increase the number of soldiers guarding the provisions. In addition, I will also send people to keep an eye on them. Fong Dingshan said with a relaxed expression. If the other party still had 150,000 cavalrymen, he would be nervous. But now there were only 50,000 of them, which was even less than him. He was really not afraid. This was also because the emperor did not give an order. Otherwise, he would have dared to kill these people. Fong Dingshan said it so casually that Shi Hung also breathed a sigh of relief. This was the advantage of having strong soldiers. When dealing with things, they would have a lot more confidence. Well, then we have to pay attention to the World War's every move at all times. Of course, the main thing is to attack the city. As long as we take down the first city, even if they have other ideas, they will have to hold back. When we deal with the five-star army, it will be time to go back and deal with them. General Tsin, please pay attention to this point. After going around in circles, they finally returned to the problem of how to take down the first city. Yes, I will do my best. But now, we are a little short of troops. Can we see if we can transfer some from the rear? Guang asked tentatively. These days, although the five-star army that was guarding the city was under great pressure, they also suffered a lot of losses. The number of wounded had exceeded 30,000, and the other soldiers were also exhausted. If they could get a fresh army to join them now, then they would have a greater chance of taking down the city. Shi Hung was the military commander personally appointed by the emperor. He was in charge of all the military affairs at the front line. Only he had the final say on things like transferring troops. After hearing Guang's request, he asked very seriously, General Tsin, how many more troops do you need? Can you guarantee that you can take down the first city? Hearing that there was hope, Guang said with some excitement, there is no problem in taking down the first city. I can feel that the enemy's strength has been greatly reduced. Now, it is just a little bit away. If Marquis can give me an additional 100,000 troops, then I am confident that I can take down the city within 5 days. If it is not possible, I am willing to offer my head. This was equivalent to giving a military order. If there were really 100,000 fresh troops, they could attack from the 4 city gates regardless of day or night. It was really possible to take down the city in 5 days. Oh, so confident? That's good. Marquis will immediately give the order to transfer troops. Shi Hung was also very excited when he heard this. Although the transfer of 100,000 infantrymen was not part of the plan, it would be a great achievement if they could take down the first city. Not only would he be able to report to the emperor, but he would also be able to obtain a great achievement. Thank you, Ho Yi. Hearing that the matter was approved, Guang was also very excited. The meeting ended. Shi Hung found his messenger and took out the Tiger Troop Talisman. He asked them to go to Tulu City, Sambulachuan City, Shajing City, and Jingzhou City to transfer troops. Tulu City was the fortress of the rear base of the Baiming army. There were originally 50,000 soldiers there. They were responsible for guarding the provisions, and if there were any changes, they would be reinforcements. When Shi Hung gave the order, 40,000 of the 50,000 soldiers were transferred. Sambulachuan City had fewer soldiers. There were only 30,000 soldiers guarding the city. Among them, there were 10,000 wounded soldiers who had retreated from the front line. Shi Hung gave the order, and 20,000 healthy soldiers were transferred away, leaving only 10,000 injured soldiers behind. If there were no external forces, there wouldn't be any problems. There were 60,000 soldiers out of 100,000. The last 40,000 soldiers could only be sent to Shajing City and Jingzhou City. This made it difficult for Rong Xiao, who was in charge here. As a businessman, he knew that if he wanted to expand his business, he could not do without his own people in the imperial court. How could he be considered one of his own people? Of course, it was not as good as being an official himself. Once he became a pillar of the country, who would dare to cause trouble for him in the future? After a discussion with the Rong family, Rong Xiao finally gave Shiheng 200,000 taels of silver. In addition to his contribution in successfully instigating the rebellion of the two cities, he was promoted to general of the two cities. He became Shiheng's favorite person. When Shiheng gave the order, Rong Xiao knew that his chance to perform had come. He called Su Yuan over and said with a troubled expression, "The opportunity is here. However, when we negotiated with the Spirit-Severing Army, we said that they wouldn't go against the 5-star army. What do you think we should do?" This. Su Yuanjiang furrowed his brows. After following Shabi for such a long time, he knew the general's temper. He was a man of his word. Based on how much Yang Qindong valued him, even without the agreement, Yang Qindong probably wouldn't send troops out due to guilt, let alone with the agreement in hand. However, Su Yuan knew that Rong Xiao didn't call him over to see him shake his head. Rong Xiao wanted him to come up with a plan. Well, the Han people have a saying, times are different now. The situation is different, so the original agreement will have to be changed. What's more, he's been drinking wine every day, and with Wu Xiaoyi's death, the other 3 teachers have a lot of opinions about him. I think it's better to bypass him and talk to the teachers directly. Is that okay? Rong Xiao's eyes lit up when he heard that. Why not? How about this? I will talk to the 3 teachers first. However, I would like to ask Lord Rong to remove the people who are monitoring the 3 division masters, as well as those who are responsible for sowing discord. Since we are here to talk, we must show our sincerity. Su Yuan thought for a moment and proposed his idea. That's not a problem. Rong Xiao agreed. He had no other choice. Although the method of sowing discord had some effect now, as long as he was given time, he was confident that he could take over the military power of the 3 division commanders. Then, he could find a reason to arrest them. However, with Shiheng's order in a short 3 days, he did not have the patience to wait for the next batch of soldiers. Chapter 1176. Su Yuan left Rong Xiao's place and went straight to the residence of Kong Ji, the commander of the new 2nd Army's 1st Cavalry Division in Shajing City. In the Kong residence, Kong Ji was very surprised when he found out that Su Yuan was outside the residence and wanted to see him. He couldn't figure out why the other party wanted to see him at this time. Well, since he's here, I'll invite him in. Kong Ji and Su Yuan sat opposite each other in the living room of the residence. The other bodyguards were all removed from the living room. This was Su Yuan's request. After all, he was here to ask for help. Not only would he lose face if he said some soft words in front of so many people, he was also afraid that he would be put on the spot. Without anyone else around, Su Yuan didn't care about his reputation and directly made his request. "Mr. Kong, I'm sorry for offending you before. It wasn't my idea to send people to monitor your residence. And those people who tried to sow discord in the division weren't sent by me either. I've already protested to Rong Xiao about this matter. He has already promised that these people will all be recalled. I hope that this matter won't affect our friendship." Kong Ji was shocked that Su Yuan was so humble right from the start. It wasn't a big deal to monitor his own people, and he didn't intend to do anything when the time wasn't right. But those people who tried to sow discord really gave him a headache. They spread unfavorable words about him everywhere in the division. At first, it was fine. With his usual character, no one believed those words. But some things were afraid of being repeated. If he said too much, it was inevitable that people would believe him. Over time, there were people in the division who started to have ulterior motives. It was just that they didn't have enough evidence. In addition, This matter was instigated by Rong Xiao. Even if he wanted to make a move, he didn't have the right opportunity. Originally, he thought that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to regain the command power when he really needed to use the army one day. He didn't expect that Su Yuan would solve all these problems and worries. This was an unexpected surprise. Of course, since he did such a big thing for him, he must have a favor to ask of him. Kongji didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. So although he was happy, he pretended to be calm and said, "Mr. Su, we're not outsiders. Just tell me, what price do you need me to pay?" "Mr. Kong, you're really straightforward. It's like this. The military operation to attack the first city is going smoothly, and it looks like we'll be able to take it in a few days. Considering the problem of maintaining the safety of that place in the future, Admiral Shiheng ordered our new Second Army to send 20,000 soldiers to assist. The mission given was to send 40,000 soldiers. Rong Xiao had 20,000 soldiers. Now that there were only 20,000 soldiers left, he had to rely on the new Second Army. With the current strength of the new Second Army, there were a total of 4 divisions. If each division could send 5,000 soldiers, then the number would be enough. When he heard that the beginning city would be conquered in a few days, Kong Ji's heart started to beat more frequently and faster. If the beginning city was really conquered, then when would he be able to return to the 5-star army? Fortunately, Su Yuan's next words made Kong Ji heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, he also saw the other party's real intention. Baiming did not have enough soldiers at the front line. They must have fallen into a difficult situation when attacking the beginning city. Otherwise, they would not have come to beg him. After knowing the other party's purpose, Kong Ji felt relieved and started to pick up his gun. "Mr. Su, I'm sure you still remember the agreement that the military commander signed with you. The first clause is that we can't be enemies with a 5-star army anymore. We were forced to surrender. We've already let down Bugnam of Gojoseon. How can we go against our conscience and be enemies with them? We really can't do such a thing." Su Yuan revealed an expression that said, "As expected." He knew that the other party would say this. Then he smiled and said, "Mr. Kong, you've misunderstood. Didn't I say just now? These troops are not going to fight with the 5-star army. They are only responsible for the defense of the beginning city in the future. You also know that even if there is no 5-star army on the grassland, there is still the Walla cavalry and the Mongolian cavalry from various tribes. They're not so easy to deal with. The beginning city is such a big city in front of us. If we don't have enough troops to defend it, we will face the danger of losing it at any time." The reason given by Su Yuan was very suitable. Kong Ji could not find a reason to refute it. However, their division only had more than 8,000 people. If 5,000 people were transferred away all of a sudden, their strength would be reduced by more than half. This was not what he wanted to see. It was certainly a good thing to be able to remove the people who were monitoring him and spreading rumors in the army. However, how to agree to the other party's request without being heartbroken was what Kong Ji needed to consider. He did not speak for a long time. He looked at Su Yuan and asked anxiously, "Mr. Kong, say something. Sir Rong Xiao is still waiting for the news." "Well, it's really impossible to transfer 5,000 people from a division." Kong Ji had a rough idea in his mind in a short period of time. He finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, Su Yuan was immediately unhappy. "Mr. Kong, what do you mean? I just said that we are not going to be enemies with the 5-star army. Wait, Mr. Su, wait for me to finish. You just said that these troops are not rushing to the beginning city to be enemies with a 5-star army. They're responsible for defending the city after taking it down. If that's the case, what do you think about this? I'll transfer 2,000 people from the division to you. Then you'll recruit 3,000 able-bodied men from the city as soldiers. In this way, won't you make up 5,000 people? The advantage of doing this is that it won't affect the combat ability of our new second army. It can also help you complete the mission. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Besides, it's just a mission to defend the city. It's not difficult. Even if they haven't undergone any training, they can still do it well. What do you think? Kong Ji came up with a way to get the best of both worlds. He needed to ensure the combatability of a division. The organization could be incomplete, but they could be pulled and fought when there was a mission. Therefore, he had no choice but to come up with this plan. Originally, Su Yuan wanted to say something. However, when he heard this method, his attitude became a little hesitant. Since he did not reject it immediately, there was a way. Kong Ji added fuel to the fire and said, "Mr. Su, why does Biming value us so much? Isn't it because our army has a certain level of combatability? If we don't have this characteristic, who will still value us? By that time, it'll be time to get rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. If that's the case, we won't have a good ending. I'm sure Mr. Su won't have a good time either. Factions are the most important thing in the army. A good man has 3 factions." Kong Ji said these words from Su Yuan's perspective. This made Su Yuan, who was originally hesitant, finally make up his mind. "Not bad, Mr. Kong. You're indeed a talented general with both wisdom and courage. You're right. How about this? I'll go talk to Mr. Rongshao now. Oh, by the way, about the 2,000 people that the 1st Cavalry Division will send out, please make early preparations." Sure. I'll make the arrangements now." Kong Ji thought about how some people in the division were dissatisfied with him. Some of them were simply spreading rumors. He didn't know how to deal with these people. Now that there was an opportunity, it would be good to get rid of them so that he could better control the troops. Su Yuan left in a hurry. He did not know how he told Rong Xiao, but the matter was settled. Then, the recruitment of soldiers in the 2 cities began. They were not working for the 5-star army, which was for the people. The people were not very enthusiastic about joining the army. In the end, there was no other way. The recruitment became a recruitment of able-bodied men. Who asked Shi Heng to be so anxious? Rong Xiao, who wanted to show off, had to do things well. Not only that, he also decided to personally send 40,000 troops to Beginning City to curry favor with Shi Heng. Under Beginning City, the siege was still ongoing. Since the military order was made in front of Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan, under the command of Tsingguang, the attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Several times, their soldiers rushed up the city tower. Although they were eventually suppressed, at least they saw the dawn of victory. The siege was very lively. The Wara war camp under the city was unusually quiet. This kind of siege warfare was not suitable for cavalry. They had been under the city for a long time, and some of the cavalry were even lazy. But all of this changed with the return of a few Walla cavalry. They were the Walla warriors who followed General He Lei to the battle. They were lucky enough to escape. Naturally, they had to return to the camp and report everything they saw and experienced to their leader. In fact, they were not the only ones who returned. Not far from the camp, there were hundreds of cavalry waiting there. Everyone heard Shi Wanshan shout and knew that Biming had joined forces with the 5-star army. They were worried that once they returned, they would alert the enemy, so they sent a few representatives back to the camp. In the leader's tent, Yesen received these deserters. After learning that He Lei died in battle and only a few hundred of the cavalry escaped, he was so angry that he flipped the desk in front of him and said angrily, "You said that the reason why we lost was because the Biming army stabbed us in the back, right?" "Yes, leader. We saw it with our own eyes and experienced it personally. Otherwise, with our fast horses, no matter how many enemies there are, they can't stop us." Several soldiers who escaped knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Good. What a good Biming army. I trusted them so much, but they dared to play tricks behind our backs. I'm going to find Shi Heng and ask him for an explanation. Yesen could not suppress his anger and was about to leave the tent. "You can't." A figure blocked his way, and then that person knelt on the ground. "Leader, you can't do that. Biming and the 5-star army have joined forces. If we go to them now, not only will it not have the slightest effect, but it will also alert them. If we don't do it well, they will do harm to our leader." The person who spoke was the deputy general that Yesen had just promoted, Chao Lu. In Mongolian, it meant stone. Chapter 1177. This person was very burly and had good skills. More importantly, he was not only a boorish man, but he also had his own ideas when he encountered problems. Ever since he was discovered by Yesen, he was promoted to be a deputy general by his side, in charge of his own safety. Sometimes, he would even lead troops to become a general. When Chao Lu blocked the way, Yesen wanted to kick him away out of anger. However, when he heard that the Biming army would be a threat to his safety, he quickly calmed down. Whether it was the battle with Taohua or the battle with the Five-Star Army, although he had failed many times, he still lived until now because of his carefulness. For such a person, if you asked him to take risks, he would never do such a stupid thing. Since he could not meet Shi Hung, there were some things that he could not figure out what was going on. He could not help but feel a little unwilling. He suppressed his anger and asked Chao Lu, "Let me ask you, do you think the Biming army and the Five-Star army have really joined forces?" I don't know, but I don't think so. If that's the case, why are they attacking the beginning city so fiercely? Moreover, they did not ask for our help from the beginning to the end. This makes no sense. Chao Lu shook his head. That's right, that's what I think as well. If the Biming army and the Five-Star army have really joined forces, what they should do is to besiege us instead of acting for us. Besides, their deaths and injuries are real. I don't believe that they will betray us. Yesen nodded and agreed with Chao Lu's words. Although he was puzzled, when he turned around and saw the few cavalry warriors kneeling on the ground, he became suspicious again. He knew these people, and 2 of them were Helay's bodyguards. They would never lie to him. Then who was telling the truth? To be able to become the leader of the Wara, Yesen was indeed smart. He quickly thought of a way. He said to Chao Lu beside him, Go to Shi Hang's tent. Don't tell him anything else. Just tell him that I have caught a cold and am sick. Ask him to come and see me." When he heard that he was going to Shi Hang's tent, Chao Lu's heart skipped a beat. He thought that the leader wanted him to question the other party. However, when he heard that it was just a message, he immediately felt relieved. "Leader, you mean to bring Shi Hung to our camp, and then you can question him yourself? Not bad." He nodded his head in satisfaction. He was happy for Chao Lu's intelligence. At the same time, he said, "I want to ask him myself. What's going on? If this is really a trap set by the Five-Star army, then he needs to give me an explanation and give me enough compensation. 100,000 elite cavalrymen, just thinking about it makes my heart ache." After years of constant battles, Yeshen's strength had been greatly reduced. Why don't we wait and see? We'll leave when they relax. This way, we'll be safer. Knowing that Lu was right, Yesen nodded in agreement. That's good too. In order to confuse them, we'll tell them that I'm sick and won't be around for 2 days. But you have to find those generals in private and tell them to prepare to retreat at any time. As long as we can leave here safely, some things should be thrown away. After sighing, Yesen came to the bed in the tent and laid down. He was really going to pretend to be sick. In the Biming army's main tent, Shi Hung found Fong Dingshan and told him about Lu's intentions. Then he asked for his opinion. "General Fong, in your opinion, does Yesen want to harm Marquis?" Fong Dingshan didn't respect Shi Hung from the bottom of his heart. Especially after working together for a while, he found that this person was very afraid of death after he got a high position. His ability was only above average, and he was even worse than Fong Dingshan in some aspects. Fong Dingshan only had his current position because of his good luck and seniority. If Shi Hung died in battle, then the position of commander would fall on Fong Dingshan's head. Therefore, Fong Dingshan really hoped that something would happen to Shi Hung. It would be best if he was killed. Of course, he wouldn't show any of this. When he saw Shi Hang's fear of death, Fong Dingshan despised him in his heart, but he said with a nonchalant expression, "That shouldn't be the case. The Wala army only has 50,000 cavalry. If they really hurt you, they won't be a match for our Biming army. Is Commander overthinking it?" After Fong Dingshan's explanation, Shi Hang's worries were mostly gone. Thinking about it, if they really wanted to harm the Biming army, the Wala army would have acted before the 100,000 cavalry left, and not now. Now that there was no news of the 100,000 cavalry leaving, it was indeed not the time to act. He shook his head and said, "It seems like Marquis is overthinking it. Commander, you must be overthinking it." Fong Dingshan chuckled. At this moment, a soldier outside the tent asked to see him. The moment he entered the tent, he confirmed that he was indeed sick. Now, the news had spread throughout the entire Vala cavalry camp. Under normal circumstances, when a general was on the battlefield, even if he was sick, he wouldn't tell anyone. This could easily affect the morale of the army. Therefore, Shi Hung never thought that Yesen would pretend to be sick. Okay, you can leave. After telling the soldier to leave, Shi Hung chuckled. It seems like Marquis is overthinking it. Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. Marquis just got the news that the 100,000 soldiers from the 4 nearby cities are about to arrive. At that time, it will be time for us to attack the beginning city. General Fong, our chance to make a great contribution is coming. Then I shall congratulate you in advance, Commander. Fong Dingshan cupped his hands together. Then there was a burst of laughter in the tent. 50 miles away from the northeast of the beginning city, an army that stretched far away was gathering here. They were the troops of Bugnam of Gojozi and Yang Chendong, who had rushed here from the direction of the Wulubone River. In fact, they had been here for more than a day. Considering that the other troops had not yet arrived at the designated location, Yang Chendong ordered the army to stop and rest. Everyone was exhausted from the rapid march. Next was the counterattack, and their physical strength must keep up. Tell the soldiers to eat some dry food, rest more, and don't light a fire. Yang Chendong instructed the captain of the Longway 1st Brigade, Chiu Vi. Chiu Vi took the order and left. Yang Chendong looked at Beta Persei, who was standing beside him, and asked, "Where is the Far Eastern Army?" "Young Master, I just received their telegram. They will arrive at the designated location by tonight at the latest. Then, they will wait for the young master's order, and the counterattack will begin." Beta Persei said excitedly. They had been rushing all the way, and finally they were going to fight. Of course, he was happy because he loved fighting. "How many people do they have now?" Yang Chendong asked again. "Young Master, almost all of the Liaodong army's 40,000 people have arrived. There are also nearly 20,000 people from the Mabe division and about 40,000 Mongolian cavalry. In addition, there are 70,000 Walla cavalry prisoners who are being guarded by General Shi Wanshan and nearly 70,000 soldiers." Beta Persei replied respectfully. Chapter 1178. Okay. Yang Chendong's eyes showed confidence when he heard that there were 100,000 cavalry to help. "Tell Wang Shan to inform Tiger's Man that we will launch a full-scale counterattack tomorrow morning. We will make the enemy pay the price and let them remember this painful lesson." "Yes." Beta Persei agreed and turned to leave when he heard that the battle was tomorrow. "Wait, send a telegram to Feng Liang and tell him to inform Sha Bei to regain control of Shajing and Jingzhou City and cut off the retreat of the Walla cavalry." Yang Chendong thought that if it were not for the participation of Yeshen's troops, the Baiming army would not have been able to attack New City for such a long time without any worries. He was determined to hit them hard and even had the idea of taking down Yesen. The telegrams were sent out one by one. Chenbo, the commander of the Far Eastern Army, who received the telegram, issued an order to inform the troops to have a good rest tonight and start the counterattack tomorrow morning. The telegram was sent to Tiger's Man in Jingzhou City, which made him excitedly slap the desk. A good desk was ruined just like that. "Great. Immediately inform Lord Yu, Division Commander Yang Si, and other division commanders to come to the military headquarters for a meeting." Hu Meng laughed heartily. After waiting for more than a year, news of the counterattack had finally arrived. It was time for him to vent his frustrations. Shajing City. Director Feng Liang, who had been hiding in the basement, almost shouted out in excitement when he received the telegram from Yang Chendong. After suppressing the excitement in his heart, he gently knocked on the wall door leading to the ground room. After a while, Sha Bei walked in. Since Rong Xiao left with 40,000 soldiers, most of the people who were monitoring him before also left, leaving only 2 people on the big tree outside the courtyard. They were only responsible for watching Sha Bei and not letting him leave the hospital. As for the situation in the courtyard, they didn't even want to look at it. A drunkard was not worthy of their attention. As soon as he entered the basement, he saw Feng Liang's excited look. Sha Bei was also happy, but he still asked tentatively and expectantly, "Director Feng, is there any good news?" "You're right," the sixth young master called. "Take a look at it yourself," Feng Liang said and handed the telegram to Sha Bei. Then he saw the dignified man, who had silently swallowed all the grievances he had suffered, burst into tears. Good. The sixth young master still believes in me. He has also given me an important task. This is the time for us to shed our shame. These days, Sha Bei's mental pressure was great. He had no choice but to surrender, and there was even an element of faking it. But how many people could understand him? Could the sixth young master really understand him? At least if it were him, if his subordinates publicly announced their surrender to Baiming, he would not believe them no matter what. Putting himself in Baiming's shoes, did Yang Qindong really trust him that much? This had become the biggest question in his heart all this time. Even though Feng Liang appeared in front of him, he was still very happy. However, this did not mean that the sixth young master really believed him. What if the sixth young master came to calm him down? Before he got the final answer, he could imagine how worried Sha Bei was. Now that he saw this telegram, he could finally be relieved. If Yang Qindong did not really trust him, how could he tell him the war plan in advance? When he thought about how the sixth young master still believed in him despite what he had done, Sha Bei felt like a gentleman would die for his bosom friend. What was not worth risking his life for? After he calmed down and walked out of the basement, Sha Bei's spirit changed at this moment. "Steward, do two things. First, bring people to kill that annoying fellow on the tree outside the courtyard. Second, inform Kong Ji and the other two teachers to come to my place for a meeting." The aura of a superior reappeared on Shi Bi's body, and his words were clear and forceful. The steward, who was originally a little stooped, suddenly straightened his body at this moment. He asked as if he did not know his master, "Master, killing people, don't be afraid. The weather will change soon. Some bedbugs should be dealt with very early," Sha Bei said with an imposing manner. Shajing City was nearly 1,000 miles away from the first city. It was unknown how long it would take for the news of the counterattack to arrive. He could prepare in advance here and did not have to worry about the news being leaked. Seeing that Sha Bei was so confident, the steward, who had been holding his breath for a long time, immediately said, "Yes, master. Don't worry. I'll arrange it now." There were just two soldiers in charge of the surveillance mission. When they were still leaning against the tree trunk to rest, two arrows suddenly pierced into their bodies. The speed and ferocity of the arrows was so fast that they didn't even have the strength to scream before they were sent to meet the king of hell. After an hour, Kong Ji and the other two division commanders rushed to the new Second Army's military headquarters and saw Sha Bei, who had changed into a brand new general's military uniform. You're here. Take a look. Wearing the 5-star Army's military uniform is still the best." Sha Bei laughed and turned around. "Military commander," Kong Ji asked in confusion, but he already had a vague feeling in his heart. "Come, it's time to tell you the sixth young master's plan. Division commanders, listen up," Sha Bei said in a powerful voice. The 3 division commanders stood up straight because of this. The long-lost feeling returned to their bodies. Su Mansion. Su Yuan was eating dinner. Compared to normal people who only ate one dish, or at most 3 or 4 dishes, he had more than a dozen dishes in front of him. Not only that, but there were also 2 beautiful women by his side. Ever since he submitted to Baiming, Su Yuan's life had fallen into debauchery. No one came to control him, and no one dared to control him. This made him more and more lawless and unruly. Especially after Rong Xiao left, the entire city was completely under his control. He had even less scruples. Even when he ate, he was very ostentatious. He did not even need to use his hands. Instead, he needed someone to feed him, and it had to be a beautiful woman who fed him. While he was enjoying everything, he did not know that his brothers from the 1st Cavalry Division, led by Kong Ji, had surrounded the courtyard. His military power had already fallen. Those old brothers he trusted were either poisoned to death at home by the concubines of the CIA agents, or were ambushed and killed or captured by Kong Ji and the others on their way home or to the barracks. As for the infantry division, although there were 2 or 3 old brothers who escaped the net, because of their lack of strength, Sha Bei personally led the army into the barracks and dismembered them. Su Yuan was a selfish person. Ever since he took control of the military and took over Sha Bei, even if there were benefits, he would only share them with those old brothers. As for the ordinary soldiers under him, he did not care at all. The soldiers who were used to receiving high salaries from the 5-star army suddenly lost their source of income. Even if it was pitifully little, which one of them did not feel angry in their hearts. So when they saw Sha Bei wearing a general's uniform and leading troops into the barracks, not only did they not resist, but most of them even helped him to capture those who wanted to resist. The military incident ended with loud thunder and small raindrops. From the beginning to the end, there was no movement at all. Su Yuan, who had been enjoying himself in the mansion, did not notice at all, until the housekeeper rushed into the dining room in a panic. Su Yuan was still lying in the arms of the beautiful woman and saying some dirty words. Old master, something bad has happened." After the housekeeper rushed in, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. "What's going on?" Su Yuan frowned slightly. He was very angry at the housekeeper's performance, and he was even angrier that such a good atmosphere was disturbed. Su Yuan still had an indifferent expression, but in the eyes of the housekeeper, he was angry that he did not fight back. However, he still knelt on the ground and trembled as he said, "Old master, outside our mansion, there are a lot of soldiers. They have surrounded us?" "Oh, what?" Su Yuan, who suddenly realized what was going on, was also shocked. Then, he stood up from the beauty's arms and asked loudly, "We're surrounded. What the hell is going on? Which part are they from?" "Old master, you should go out and see for yourself." The housekeeper really did not know how to explain or how to answer, but he believed that facts spoke louder than words. Looking at the steward's appearance, Su Yuan had a bad feeling in his heart. However, the habit of being in a position of power made him not lose his head out of fear. Instead, he shouted towards the outside of the hall, "Men, bring me my weapons and armor." Su Yuan, who had put on his armor and picked up his weapons, opened the door with more than 40 bodyguards in the mansion. "Who dares to surround this general's mansion? Do you want to die?" As soon as the door opened, a loud roar was heard. This was the preemptive strike. Su Yuan wanted to use this method to intimidate the people who came. As long as the other party was scared, he could take the opportunity to leave here and go to the military camp to mobilize soldiers. At that time, whoever came to find trouble with him would die a horrible death. However, the result was destined to disappoint him. Not only did his roar not intimidate the people around him, but a loud laugh was heard instead. The person said, "Mr. Su, you are so arrogant. Looks like you really have the prestige of an official after becoming a Beiming official. You dare to kill anyone." The voice was so familiar. Su Yuan looked towards the source of the voice and saw his former colleague, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji, riding on a horse and looking at him with a smile on his face. What was even more eye-catching was that the other party was wearing the green uniform of the 5-star army and the white cape of the division commander. He looked majestic and heroic. The person who came was actually Kong Ji. Su Yuan knew that it was impossible to use his status to intimidate others. His expression changed from anger to a smile and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Mr. Kong. But what is the meaning of this? Why did you bring so many people to my mansion? Is there a military operation? Why didn't I know about it?" Chapter 1179. He was just pretending to be confused. The other party had already surrounded his residence. It was obvious that they were coming with a strong momentum, not to mention that they were wearing the military uniform of the 5-star army. However, Su Yuan deliberately ignored this. He didn't mention it because he wanted to stall for time. He believed that the news of his mansion being surrounded must have spread. Perhaps if he held on for a little longer, his old brothers would come and rescue him. Seeing that Su Yuan was still talking nonsense, Kong Ji shook his head. This person was a little smart, but only a little smart. He didn't have a long-term vision. He was destined to not achieve anything big. Sigh, Mr. Su, you don't have to pretend anymore. You should be able to see why I'm here. I think it's better for you to surrender so that you won't lose face in front of so many people. Kong Ji pointed out the truth. This was the same as poking through the last layer of window paper. It was somewhat out of Su Yuan's expectations. He couldn't help but be surprised. Hearing Kong Ji's confident tone, could it be that he had already taken over the entire Shajing city? If that was the case, then he was really in danger. But how could he do it? Not only was there his infantry division here, there were also the 1st Cavalry Division, the 2nd Cavalry Division, the 3rd Cavalry Division, and other troops. How could he, a small commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, convince them all? Unless Commander Ibei stood up personally. When he thought about Ibei, shouldn't he be drinking in his mansion now? Right? Why didn't the 2 people who usually kept an eye on the new 2nd Army report today? They should have sent a message before dinner. What was going on? Were they scared by the appearance of Kong Ji and the others? Even at this time, Su Yuan still didn't think that Ibei would stand up one day. After all, he was the one who wrote the public surrender letter. In order to please Baiming, he even killed his guard captain, Wu Xiaoi. Such a person was basically useless. In a short period of time, it could be said that a myriad of thoughts ran through his mind. The final result was that they could still fight. Kong Ji first looked at the soldiers surrounding his mansion and found that most of them were still wearing the uniforms of the Baiming army. He immediately felt confident and stopped talking to Kong Ji. Instead, he said to the soldiers, "Brothers, Kong Ji has lost his mind and wants to deal with me. I am Baiming's personal lord of Shajing City. You want to deal with me because you want to fall out with Baiming, but have you thought about the consequences? You'll be beheaded and your family will be implicated." Needless to say, Su Yuan's shout did cause a certain amount of disturbance in the army. Even now, there were still many soldiers who didn't understand what was going on. It was only out of habit that they followed their commanding officer to carry out the mission. Just now, outside the mansion, when they saw that Su Yuan's mansion was surrounded, some people were confused. Now that these words were said, many people's faces changed dramatically. Some even looked at the leader, Kong Ji, with a somewhat different gaze. This change fell into Su Yuan's eyes and naturally made him very happy. He immediately added fuel to the fire and said, "This is clearly Kong Ji wanting to offend his superiors. This is all his own idea. Brothers, don't be confused and make mistakes with him. How about this? I will only catch the ringleader and don't care about the accomplices. If anyone is willing to follow me, it will be a meritorious performance. Later, not only will I not hold him accountable, but I will also reward him." The soldiers who were originally at a loss and muttering in their hearts became more hesitant after hearing Su Yuan's shout. Some people were even considering whether to stand by Su Yuan's side. Kong Ji didn't expect that at this time, Su Yuan could still make such a counterattack. He couldn't help but be amused for a moment and said, "What? Is this the final battle of a trapped beast? Do you really think that I didn't prepare at all before coming here? If you want to die, then this division commander will fulfill your wish. Come, invite the commander." Just a moment ago, Sibei had already arrived, but he didn't stand out. Instead, he stood outside the team. Kong Ji had already seen this. He thought of what Commander Sibei said in the previous meeting. He said that he didn't want to face the traitor Su Yuan, so he didn't have the intention to invite the commander. But now, the morale of the army was obviously shaken. If the commander didn't come out, then it was very likely that there would be a problem. The moment Sibei called for the commander, the crowd and the team panicked. Just as many people looked around, Sibei appeared. He was wearing the 5-star Army's uniform, especially the shining golden beads on his shoulder. Even though the sky was about to turn dark, they were still very dazzling. Sibei finally appeared. When Kong Ji called for the commander, Su Yuan felt that something was wrong. This seemed to be completely out of his control and even imagination. And when he saw the Shui appear, this feeling became reality, making him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. A commander was a commander after all. His prestige wasn't something that Division Commander Kong Ji could compare with. In particular, there were all kinds of people. Due to the lack of time, there were people from all divisions. Kang Ji was only a division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. It was obviously difficult for him to completely control them. But when it came to Si-Bei, this wasn't a problem. As a commander, which soldier wasn't his former soldier? Si-Bei's appearance caused the noisy discussions from before to immediately disappear. The situation was immediately reversed, and Su Yuan was pressured to the point that he couldn't breathe. After being stunned for a few breaths, Su Yuan's expression turned from black to white and then back to black. When he saw Si-Bei appear, still wearing the 5-Star Army's uniform, he knew that things were going in the worst direction. But he still wouldn't give up without a fight. He was very clear what kind of role he had played before and how many things he had done wrong to the 5-Star Army. In the new 2nd Army, anyone could surrender, but he couldn't. Based on what he had done, even if Si-Bei didn't kill him, he wouldn't be able to answer to Bugnam of Gojoseon. He didn't have any friendship with Yang Chendong. He didn't believe that Yang Chendong would spare him, a two-faced person. If he didn't want to give up without a fight, then he could only fight back. Even if Si-Bei personally appeared, Su Yuan still pretended to be unafraid and shouted, "Commander Si-Bei, aren't you sleeping every day? What are you doing here? Oh, I know. You must have been threatened by someone, right? The person who threatened you is Kang Ji, right? Don't worry. With me here, no one can hurt you. As long as you stand on my side, I can guarantee your safety." Originally, because of Si-Bei's appearance, all the soldiers started to take sides. But with Su Yuan's shout, some of the weak-willed soldiers became confused. Could it be that Kang Ji really threatened the commander and that Kang Ji wanted to rebel? The changes in the soldiers below didn't escape Si-Bei's eyes. He couldn't help but sigh and said, "Enough, Su Yuan. I didn't expect you to have such ability. You can turn black into white and say it so righteously. I'm afraid that people who don't know you will really believe your words. But what's true is true. How can it change because of a few words from you? Sigh, surrender. I will plead with Bugnam of Gojoseon to save your life." After saying this to Su Yuan, Si-Bei didn't have any intention of stopping. Instead, he said to the surrounding soldiers, "Soldiers, Si-Bei was forced by the situation and for the survival of a new 2nd Army. I had no choice but to bow to Baiming. But this doesn't really mean that I want to surrender to Baiming. It's just a temporary measure. And all of this has also received the support of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Now, Bugnam of Gojoseon has sent news that he has brought his army to the grasslands. Now, he is besieging the Baiming army and the Walla army. It won't be long before he brings his army to our Shajing city. In order to welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon, what we need to do now is to take back the city and do everything we should do. Moreover, Bugnam of Gojoseon also said that he understands the decision that everyone made under that situation. So, he won't make things difficult for any of us. Please don't worry about this. When the soldiers heard Si-Bei's speech, they all revealed a joyful expression. A person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. Just the 3 words, Bugnam of Gojoseon, represented a magnificent army. It was an invincible aura and influence. It seemed that as long as Yang Chendong was there to fight, no matter how difficult the problem was, it would be easily solved. Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon. Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon. No one knew who took the lead to shout, but at that moment, many people shouted loudly. Even the few bodyguards behind, Su Yuan hesitated for a moment before they put down their weapons and shouted loudly. To others, the thunder-like shouts were shocking, but to Su Yuan, it was no less than a death sentence. He knew that the overall situation was set, and he could not turn the situation around. Thus, he fell into a state of madness. He suddenly pointed at Si-Bei and said, "You are a villain, a fickle villain. Villain, you are talking about yourself, right? The 5-Star Army has treated you well, and Bugnam of Gojoseon has treated you even better. You actually secretly contacted Baiming and thought of betrayal. People like you are the one who is shameful." This time, without Si-Bei saying anything, Kang Ji had already started to scold. Unlike Su Yuan, who got his position as a division commander with Si-Bei's help, Kang Ji's position as a division commander was personally appointed by Yang Chendong. Moreover, Kang Ji was a Han Chinese. He had once served in the 5-star army and performed well. Although he was not Yang Chendong's student, in terms of loyalty, he was much stronger than a foreigner like Su Yuan. Su Yuan, who had already gone crazy, did not pay attention to Kang Ji. Instead, he looked at Si Bei and said, "Tell me, did you never trust me? You're lying to me, right?" Chapter 1180. She shook her head. If she didn't trust Su Yuan, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to ask Yang Chendong for the position of infantry division commander. It could be said that her one-sided kindness had harmed the other party. But now, there was no need to explain this. She didn't say anything, which made Su Yuan burst into laughter. I knew it. Ha ha ha. You never trusted me. You're a despicable person. For your big plan, you don't care about anyone's life. Even your guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi, you killed him without hesitation. A person like you is inhumane. Whoever follows you will be betrayed by you sooner or later. Bullshit. Kang Ji was still the one who shouted. The matter of guard captain Wu was originally discussed with the military commander. He also volunteered. If he didn't do that, how could you rest assured that the military commander had really surrendered? He used his own life to ensure that our entire new Second Army didn't scatter and fall into chaos. He is the biggest hero. Kang Ji's eyes turned red when he talked about Wu Xiaoyi's matter. Wu Xiaoyi's death was his own request. At that time, Kang Ji and Shi Bei both shed tears after hearing it. Now, it seemed that everything was worth it. If it wasn't for this, even if Shi Bei wasn't harmed by Beiming, she would have been forced to go somewhere else. In this way, it would be very difficult for the new Second Army to unite and form a joint force. The sacrifice of one person in exchange for the integrity of an army was worth it no matter how one looked at it. And the person who sacrificed himself was naturally a great hero. Su Yuan, who just found out the truth, widened his eyes in disbelief. He thought that Wu Xiaoyi's matter was an exception and that Shi Bei had no choice but to deal with it. He didn't expect that everything was premeditated. Thinking about it, it wasn't wrong. It was precisely because of Wu Xiaoyi's death that he and Rong Xiao lost their vigilance against Shi Bei. The idea of transferring Shi Bei away from here also stopped at that moment. He had never thought that all of this had been discussed beforehand. Thinking about how he had already fallen into someone else's trap from then on, and how it was normal for him to end up like this, he had nothing to say about his defeat. Su Yuan, who knew the truth, seemed to have aged a lot in that instant. In the eyes of the others, it was more or less unbearable. After all, this was his old brother. Sai, you should decide on your own. You should know that once you fall into the hands of others, it will be difficult for you to even die. Originally, Shirbi wanted to plead with Yang Chendong, but looking at this person's recent actions, it was simply unforgivable. Instead of waiting to be captured and tortured, it was better to have a quick death. It could also be considered as leaving behind the last bit of dignity in life. As soon as he said that, Su Yuan's body, which was about to collapse, straightened up again. People said that a bad life was better than a good death. He didn't want to die, and with a plop, he knelt in front of Shirbi. Military commander, I don't want to die. We are old brothers who have gone through fire and water together for many years. Please spare my life for the sake of my hard work, even if I didn't make any contributions. Bugnam of Gojoseon admires you so much. As long as you are willing to plead for mercy, he will definitely spare me. As he spoke, he crawled on the ground and quickly came under Shirbi's mount. Su Yuan spoke with snot and tears. Looking at Su Yuan's appearance, Shirbi felt a trace of pity, but military discipline was a mountain, so he still turned his head to the side. If he really let Su Yuan go, how would he explain to the sixth young master, and how would he explain to the dead Wu Xiaoyi? After continuously crying a few times, there was no response from Shirbi. Su Yuan's eyes flashed with madness, and he suddenly shouted, "No! Why? We are old brothers who have gone through hard times together. You can be a military commander, but I can only be a division commander. You can obtain Bugnam of Gojoseon's trust, but I can't. I don't accept this. Sure be, I will kill you. I want you to go to hell with me." As he shouted, Su Yuan pulled out his waist knife, raised it high, and chopped down at Sure be. Pucci, a sharp curved knife, pierced through his body. Su Yuan's eyes widened as he watched the tip of the knife come out of his chest. He then looked back at Kong Ji, who was one step ahead of him, and the light in his eyes quickly dimmed. His head drooped, and he died on spot. This was the ugliest of human nature. When you made a mistake, you didn't know how to repent. Instead, you just blamed everything on others. When things were irreparable, you would plead for mercy. When your pleading failed, you would reveal your true nature. Unfortunately, Kong Ji had long been prepared for this move, and at the crucial moment, killed him first. "Bury him." Shirby sighed and said to the bodyguard beside him. Then, he didn't look at Su Yuan, who was killed. Instead, he said to Kong Ji, "Change the flag. Announce to all the people in the city that we have changed flags and have returned to the embrace of the 5-star army." This was how the superiors were. They couldn't be too soft-hearted. Otherwise, they wouldn't only hurt themselves, but also those who believed in them and followed them. After the order was given, Shajing and Jingzhou City were closed. The original Beiming Dragon flag was also replaced with a bright 5-star red flag. Under the great wisdom of Sure Bi and the others, the new Second Army was finally saved. At the same time, it also formed a response and sounded the horn for the destruction of the world of Wara. Sure City. A new day. The sun rose as usual. It was a sunny day, and the weather was very good. There was no wind or rain, and the blue sky and green grass made people feel relaxed and happy. But this day was another dark day for the Beiming army and the Wala army. Just when most of the soldiers got up and were about to eat breakfast, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the ground. It was like spring thunder, completely breaking the tranquility of the grassland. After a series of rumbling sounds, a large number of troops appeared in the north and northwest of the barracks. They were like a sudden gust of wind, flying straight like a sharp arrow, approaching from afar. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" The scouts in charge of the security of the barracks shouted loudly, disrupting the normal order of the barracks. In the Beiming army's main tent, a scout rushed into the tent and fell to the ground. He said with his pale face, Marquis, the reinforcements of the 5-star army are here. The reinforcements are here." Sure Hung, who was eating breakfast with the help of the servants, froze when he heard this. Then, his face darkened. "Reinforcements? How many of them are here?" "Uncountable. There are so many of them. There is no end to them." The scout was so scared that he didn't know what to say. He could only tell the most direct impression. "Bullshit. That's ridiculous. How can there be so many 5-star army here?" Sure Hung reprimanded loudly. He waved his hand and dismissed the scout. Then, he hurriedly said to the soldier beside him, "Pass down the order. The entire army is ready to fight. Take out my armor and weapons." After all, he was a veteran of the battlefield. He had participated in many life and death battles. He still had the basic composure. This scene didn't only happen in Sure Hang's tent, but also in other large tents. Just like in Singguang's tent, Su Dei had already arrived. "General Tsun, the 5-star army is here. Let's prepare to retreat." "Retreat? Can't we fight?" Singguang said with some dissatisfaction. Usually, Su Dei was quite brave. Back then, they were able to break through the outer city of Sure City by relying on his bravery. But now, he became so cowardly. "Fight? How do we fight? Why don't you go out and take a look?" Su Dei shook his head bitterly. He was very clear about Singguang's courage. However, if he could still say these words after seeing the lineup of the 5-star army, then he really had to admire him. Singguang, who was a little suspicious, really walked out of the tent. When he saw the endless cavalry of the 5-star army not far away, he almost rolled down from the platform. He was already sweating profusely. He looked at Su Dei and said anxiously, "Retreat, retreat. Everyone retreat." "Roger." This was the answer Su Dei wanted. He didn't have the slightest intention to remind Singguang that Sure Hung hadn't given the order to retreat. What he wanted was to create chaos without fighting. This would be more beneficial for the expansion of the Bugnam of Gojoseon army. Sun Guang ran away without any backbone. At this moment, Shi Hung was still arranging the defense at the front line. The 70,000 Liaodong cavalry were already eager to fight. Fang Dingshan rode on a tall horse with excitement in his eyes. He had long heard about how powerful the cavalry of the five-star army was. Today, he could finally see who was better. This had always been his dream. He wanted to defeat the five-star army in front of so many people and tell the world that the Liaodong cavalry was the strongest. Rong Xiao also came and stood beside Shi Hung. At this moment, his eyes were filled with determination. This was his first time fighting a war. He had never experienced such a cruel scene before. He thought that fighting a war was just as exciting as storytelling. He didn't know the dangers and bloodshed in it. Rong Xiao's confidence came from the 100,000 soldiers behind him. In his heart, he was secretly happy that he could perform well in front of Admiral Shi Hung. In his opinion, his side had a few 100,000 cavalry and infantry. It was enough to fight against the reinforcements of the five-star army. Perhaps it would be a great achievement, a great contribution. Compared to Yu Rongxiao's calmness, Shi Hung, who was riding on the horse, had a worried look on his face. He had a feeling that since the reinforcements of the five-star army appeared so openly, they must have come prepared. Then what was their backup plan? Was it just a cavalry charge? Facing the Beiming army that was making all kinds of preparations, there would be no victory in this kind of charging formation. Was the five-star army crazy? Why did they choose to fight like this? Just as Shi Hung was thinking about the reason for all of this, where was the five-star army's backup plan and how to fight this battle, a messenger appeared with a panicked expression. Marquis, bad news, bad news. Chapter 1181. What's the matter? Why are you so panicky? How can you be so calm? Looking at the cowardly side of his subordinate, Shi Hung reprimanded him. He had already decided to punish this messenger after the big battle. Without paying attention to Shi Hung's displeasure, the messenger knelt on the ground and said with a trembling body, Marquis, the Walla army has retreated. They didn't have the intention to greet us and rushed out of the barracks. And, hearing the news that the Walla army had retreated, Shi Hung's eyes narrowed for no reason, and he had a bad premonition. During this period of time, everyone had been on guard against each other, and they were no longer as sincere as they were at the beginning. However, even though he was mentally prepared, Shi Hung was still very angry when he heard that they had retreated without fighting. Got it. You just said that there's more. What else? There's more. Deputy Chief Sun Guang has escaped with 50,000 infantrymen under him. As if he had exhausted all his strength, the messenger mustered up the courage to finish speaking. What? Hearing this news, Shi Hung's expression changed drastically. He turned around abruptly, and the sword on his body was placed on the messenger's neck. With the cold sword on his neck, the messenger's face suddenly turned pale. However, since Shi Hung had asked this question, he had to answer it. He could only continue to speak. Just now, Deputy Chief Sun Guang has retreated with his troops. They withdrew all the troops that were attacking the city and fled to the south. Ayaya, Sun Guang, you've ruined Marquis' plan. Hearing that Sun Guang had also escaped, Shi Hung's expression changed drastically. Although Sun Guang only had 50,000 soldiers in his hands, he was responsible for attacking the first city. Once they retreated, the five-star army in the first city would no longer be in danger. At the same time, they might be behind him. If that was the case, how could he resist? Not to mention, after days of bitter battles, the 50,000 soldiers under Sun Guang had experienced life and death situations. They could be described as elites. Once they left, not only would their combat power be greatly reduced, they would also not be able to find a replacement. Sun Guang's escape added even more uncertainty to the battle. In a fit of anger, he swung his saber and the messenger's head flew into the air. Shi Hung, who had killed someone, had red eyes and even his arms were trembling. It was obvious that he was angry in his heart. Report. Marquis, the 4 gates of the first city have been opened. They've rushed out of the inner city and are heading toward our camp in the outer city. Another messenger rushed over on horseback. Before he arrived, his shout had already resounded in the air. If Tsingguang was still around, they would have been able to more or less delay the 5-star army in the city from leaving the city, since they had already taken down the outer city. But now it was too late. Shi Heng's body shook slightly on the horse. Before the battle had even begun, the result had already been decided. Now that he was facing internal and external troubles, he knew that he had already lost. Shi Heng forced himself to stay alert. He looked at Rong Xiao, who was not far away, and said to the bodyguard beside him, "Ask General Rong to come over. Also, you go and inform General Fong to retreat immediately." Rong Xiao was still riding on his horse, feeling the tense atmosphere before the battle. For him, who was on the battlefield for the first time, this feeling was very exciting. It caused his adrenaline to rise uncontrollably. His face also turned a lot redder because of this. "General Rong, Marquis wants to see you." The bodyguard walked over and conveyed Shi Heng's military order. Okay. Thank you for your trouble." Rong Xiao was very excited when he heard that Shi Heng wanted to see him. He, who had focused all his attention on the battlefield, did not know what had happened behind the scenes. If he knew, he would not be happy but scared to death. He came in front of Shi Heng with an excited face. He tried his best to appear calm in order to leave the best side of Shi Heng. "Not bad. It's General Rong's first time on the battlefield, yet you're so calm. You truly have the demeanor of a great general." Shi Heng, who was trying his best to raise his spirits, praised Rong Xiao. This time, whether they could successfully escape or not depended on this person. "Thank you, Marquis, for your praise. This is all because of your leadership." Rong Xiao did not dare to take the credit. "Very good. You are not anxious or impatient." "Not bad. Since that is the case, I will leave the first battle to you. Can you complete it?" There was no time, and Shi Heng did not want to prepare any more groundwork. He went straight to the point. Hearing that he could be the vanguard, Rong Xiao was very excited. He patted his chest and said, "Marquis, please rest assured. Our swords and arrows want to drink blood. We want to have a taste." "Okay, I approve. You can go. As long as you make a great contribution, Marquis will definitely report it to the Emperor and ask for your reward." Seeing Rong Xiao so set off, Shi Heng's face finally showed a trace of satisfaction. "Thank you, Marquis." Rong Xiao cupped his fists and said gratefully. He then turned around and rode away. He did not know that once he left, he would never return. "Let's retreat." After looking at Rong Xiao's back, Shi Heng turned around and left. War was like this. It was either you die or I live. In order to survive, he could only sacrifice Rong Xiao and his 100,000 troops. On the other side, Shi Heng's order also reached the ears of Liaodong Iron Cavalry General Fong Dingshan. "You want us to retreat? What the hell?" Fong Dingshan, who had long been prepared to compete with the 5-star troop, was obviously unhappy. He looked at the messenger with a glint in his eyes, and a murderous aura exuded from his body. "General, this is Marquis' order." The messenger thought for a moment and was afraid that Fong Dingshan would vent his anger on him. Marquis had already killed one, and he did not want to be the second. Thinking of this, he carefully moved forward and said, "General, the Wallach cavalry has already retreated. General Tsingguang also left with his troops. When Marquis told me to inform you, he was also prepared to retreat. What do you think?" Fong Dingshan, who was about to vent his anger on the messenger soldier, involuntarily paused. After about 3 breaths, he let out a long sigh. "I see. Thank you for the information. General, you are too serious. Please hurry up." When a messenger heard Fong Dingshan's words of gratitude, he immediately let out a long sigh of relief. He then cupped his fists and left. After the messenger left, Fong Dingshan did not dare to delay any longer. He said to Luo Baiquan, "Pass down the order. All troops retreat. Retreat." Military orders were like mountains. Although Luo Baiquan still had a lot of questions, since it was the general's order, he had to carry it out. After he agreed, he ordered the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry to retreat in echelons. Elites were indeed elites. Even when they were retreating, they were still orderly. Compared to the army led by Shi Hung and Tsingguang, who were fleeing in panic, they were much better. The five-star army had arrived. According to yesterday's agreement, they launched a general attack at 3 in the morning. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers outside the city and tens of thousands of soldiers inside the city launched an attack together. If Shi Hung could have predicted this, or if he could have remained calm in the face of danger, with his advantage in numbers and the cooperation with the Wara cavalry, he might not have lost the battle. On the contrary, as long as he persevered, victory was not impossible. After all, the provisions of the new army in the beginning city had been used up. Just this morning, Yang Si took out all the food he had stored and made a delicious meal for the soldiers. It was as if he was going to break the axe and sink the boat. If such an opponent could be suppressed, it would only take a long time for the morale to drop, and it would be time for a counterattack. Unfortunately, under a series of small actions and preparations, Bai Ming and Walla could not be of one mind, let alone fight the enemy together. Well, he learned that the five-star army suddenly appeared in the east and north and began to attack. Leader Yesen decisively gave the order to retreat. He could not guarantee that when the five-star army arrived, the Bai Ming army could not be relied on. He would never put his hopes on the so-called allies, especially those who were not reliable. Yeshen's retreat was just a signal to retreat. Next was Tsingguang's 50,000 soldiers, Fang Dingshan's 70,000 Liaodong cavalry, and Shi Heng's 30,000 elite soldiers. An entire army of 200,000 retreated without a fight, leaving Rong Xiao and the 100,000 infantrymen on the battlefield. From an advantage to a disadvantage, the originally fierce battle ended up like this. It seemed to be a coincidence, but if one thought about it carefully, it was inevitable. If the alliance was not united, it would be better not to unite. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Having said that, Rong Xiao, who was completely unaware of all this, was riding on his war horse in high spirits and watching his army get into formation to fight the enemy. As expected of a merchant, he knew how to maximize the benefits of everything. After receiving Shi Heng's order, he gathered the generals under his command and told them openly, "Let's go and see what's going on. I am a person who does not know much about war, nor do I know much about military matters. However, there is one thing that I know, and that is that it is natural for soldiers to eat grain. Therefore, what I want to do is to solve your worries. How about this? In this battle, no matter how the court rewards the generals who have made great contributions, I will reward them with 1,000 to 10,000 taels of silver. How about it? When there is a great reward, there will be brave men." Under the great reward, the generals were all excited. They all expressed that they would fight this battle well and add glory to Rong Xiao's face. Laughing with satisfaction, Rong Xiao watched the generals leave the tent. Humming an unknown tune, he called for the military singers and prostitutes, and just like that, they began to drink in the big tent. To Rong Xiao, as long as everything was arranged to the right people, he only needed to wait for the good news in the big tent. While drinking wine and watching the music and dance, he even imagined the scene of going to Shi Hung to report his victory. Presumably, this time, he would definitely achieve great success. First city. All the cavalry warriors of a new army had done all the preparation work before 3 o'clock in the morning. They filled their stomachs, fed their war horses, sharpened their swords and spears, and prepared their bows and arrows. As soon as the time was up, they would set off together and rush out of the city. They wanted to vent all the grievances that they had suffered during these days at this moment. Commander Ma Xiangshan did not forget the last time they encountered the Liaodong iron cavalry that retreated without a fight. Although there was a military order for him to retreat at that time, and although it seemed that the order was correct, it was still a humiliation to him and the light cavalry regiment. Even in his dreams, he wanted to take revenge. Our reconnaissance regiment also requests to fight. Regiment Commander Ding Shan also stood up. Okay, seeing that it was about to become a mobilization meeting, Tiger's Mane quickly waved his hand. Since everyone is so full of fighting spirit, then I don't think there's any need to prioritize. Let's go out in 4 cities. In short, we have to go all out and defeat the enemy. Yes, there was no need to fight. Everyone could go out of the city with the fastest speed to join the battle. The Tiger generals were all eager to try, and their faces were full of murderous intent. Next, the generals rushed down the city. Then, the 4 main city gates of the first city, which led to the outside world, were all opened. Then, the vast cavalry army rushed out and rushed to the barracks behind Rong Xiao's army, which was not prepared. After receiving Rong Xiao's promise of a heavy reward, the generals were full of fighting spirit. Because of this, they all wanted to make the first contribution. The generals who were supposed to be in charge of the security at the rear also moved their troops to the front. In this way, they could find an opportunity for themselves. It was precisely this kind of move that made their rear seem very empty. When a new cavalry army rushed out of the inner city, smoothly passed through the outer city, and arrived at the rear of the Biming army, they did not encounter any decent resistance at all. Although the division commanders and regimental commanders were also very curious as to why such a result occurred, they did not stop attacking. Instead, when they arrived at the rear of Rong Xiao's army and saw that the enemy's rear was undefended, one by one, they pounced forward like wolves and tigers. They did not care why such a fatal loophole appeared in the Biming army. They only knew that if they did not take advantage of the situation, they would be bastards. Since the enemy was not prepared, they only needed to charge forward. They would definitely not greet the enemy first and give the enemy time to prepare for battle. As a result, the Biming army was in a tragic situation. Suddenly, tens of thousands of cavalrymen from the 5-star army appeared behind them. It was as if the heavens had descended from the sky. Several Biming army that had reached tens of thousands of soldiers were almost defeated after being stabbed in the butt. This kind of defeat quickly affected the other Biming army nearby. Some generals even did not know what to do with their troops. Should they prepare their bows and arrows to kill the 5-star army? Or should they turn around and deal with the 5-star army that had suddenly appeared behind them? Even the generals could not make a decision at the first moment. The soldiers below were even more chaotic. Many soldiers had fled before the battle. There were also many people who were smart enough to kneel on the spot and raise their weapons high. They were already prepared to surrender. 100,000 soldiers. Although it seemed like a lot, if they really fought, it would be difficult to kill them all even after a day and a night. However, when the thoughts of surrendering and fleeing took over, it was not that difficult to deal with. In less than an hour, the army began to collapse. When the 5-star army arrived in front of them, it did not take much effort for them to easily obtain victory. The 1st Cavalry Division was the most outstanding cavalry. Under the leadership of Division Commander Tian Hu, they were the first batch of 5-star army cavalrymen to charge into the Biming army. The original 10,000 soldiers had now expanded to 20,000 under Yang Qindong's special permission. This was also their first battle after the expansion. Division Commander Tian, whose request for everyone was to perform well, especially the veterans. They had to set an example for the new recruits and let them know what it meant to be invincible and invincible. When the 20,000 cavalrymen rushed over excitedly, they saw that the Biming army was basically defenseless. The scene of kneeling and surrendering was so spectacular and so ironic. Even Division Commander Tian Hu had experienced countless bitter battles, did not know how to describe what he was seeing at this moment. Division Commander, what is going on? 1st Cavalry Division Commander Taimu rode to Tian Hu's side and scratched his head with a confused expression. Not only Commander Taimu but even Tian Hu himself did not know what was going on. However, he was still a division commander and had been placed in an important position by Yang Qindong. His ability to adapt was still very strong. After a short moment of hesitation, he said, "Let's not care about that. We will continue the pursuit as planned. As for these captives, let the people behind us deal with them. The 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry division. What they should be doing was searching for the strongest opponent that matched their status, not standing here and receiving captives. After Tion, who gave the order, the 20,000 cavalrymen leaped over the captives and continued to charge forward as if they did not see them. Even when they passed by Rong Xiao's camp, they did not have any intention of stopping. Following closely behind were the New Army and the Liaodong Cavalry Division. They only stopped for a moment before making the same decision as the 1st Cavalry Division. They let go of the Baiming captives and continued to chase forward. Before they came, Yang Shandong had personally given the order that their opponents this time were the Walla Cavalry and the 70,000 Liaodong Cavalry of Baiming. As long as they dealt a heavy blow to them, the 5-star army would have no opponents on the grasslands in the future. This would be a great achievement. As for the Baiming captives who did not even have the will to fight, who would care about them? 3 armies passed by one after another without the slightest pause. This frightened Rong Xiao, who was in the tent. A moment ago, he was still drinking wine and watching music. However, in the next moment, someone came to report that the army was in chaos. The 5-star army cavalry appeared from all directions, and several generals had already knelt down and begged the 5-star army to surrender. The wine that he had just drunk was spat out from his mouth. Rong Xiao sat there in a daze, as if he had been struck by lightning. It was not strange for him to have such an expression. If it was someone else, they would not be any better. It was just 100,000 Ming dynasty soldiers. Even if infantry were weaker than cavalry, they should not have been defeated in less than an hour. Moreover, didn't they also have cavalry? Whether it was the Walla cavalry or the 70,000 elite Liaodong cavalry, what did they do? Did they also lose? There were too many things that he could not understand. At this moment, Rong Xiao did not know that Shi Hung and the cavalry had already escaped. He was still sitting there like a fool, until the sound of tremors came from the tent, and someone came to report that the 5-star army cavalry was charging towards the tent. Rong Xiao was even more cowardly as he buried his head under the table. He did not even dare to raise his head. He did not have the demeanor of a commander of 100,000 soldiers. At this moment, Rong Xiao could only pray in his heart that no one would notice him. No one would discover him. Perhaps his prayers really worked. Surprisingly, those cavalry troops didn't enter his tent and just ran past him several hundred meters away. The outside quickly returned to silence, and no one came into the tent. Rong Xiao patted his chest and got up from the table. Then he saw that everyone in the tent was like him, trembling on the ground. If it was only the dancers who were behaving like this, it could still be forgiven. After all, they were women, not soldiers, so he couldn't be too strict with them. However, the bodyguards who were protecting him were also behaving like this, which really made Rong Xiao furious. He couldn't help but shout loudly, "What are you all doing? Ah!" Chapter 1183. This shout scared the bodyguards who were kneeling on the ground. None of them dared to raise their heads. Rumble. Rong Xiao, who was about to stand up and teach those bodyguard a lesson, once again hid under the table. His body trembled once again. Rong Xiao was about to stand up and teach those bodyguard a lesson. However, the same thing happened again. The cavalry passed by the camp again and did not disturb them. When everything quieted down, Rong Xiao lifted his head from the desk and saw that the bodyguard were still in the same position. He was furious. Just as he was about to scold them, the cavalryman came again, forcing him to bury his head in his chest again. This repeated 3 times. It was the 1st Cavalry Division, the New Army, and the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment that passed by. This scared Rong Xiao 3 times, but it also made him more courageous. Holding a sharp, long sword in his hand, he stood up. He wanted to kill 1 or 2 of the bodyguards. He wanted to remind the others that he was the master. When there was danger, they should protect him and not just care about their own lives. Another rumbling sound rang out, but to Rong Xiao, who had already experienced it 3 times, it no longer had any effect of intimidating him. However, Just when he thought that the cavalry would pass by safely, the footsteps outside the tent were getting closer and closer. Then, the curtain of the tent was open from the outside. The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Lujua, walked in with a group of soldiers. They had also seen some tents here and had come to search them out of curiosity. As a new army that had guarded the city for several months and been trapped for more than a year, their combat strength had dropped a level due to the lack of nutrition. Yang Shindong took this into consideration and ordered them to stay and clean up the battlefield. It was the easiest job. The 1st Cavalry Division of the new army was in charge of capturing prisoners in this area. Originally, he thought that there would be no one in the tent since several cavalry units had passed by. However, he didn't expect to see more than 30 people when he entered the tent. One of them was even holding a sword and standing in the middle of the tent with an angry look on his face. "There's a tough guy here." Lujua sighed when he saw the person. As his voice fell, several bodyguards behind him rushed out and surrounded the person holding the sword. It seemed that if the other party dared to make a move, they would rush up and chop him into meat paste. The person holding the sword was Rong Xiao. He wanted to teach those bodyguards a lesson and then force them to protect him and leave here. He did not expect that there would be cavalry who noticed this place and rushed in. When he saw those bodyguards surrounding him, he was scared and threw his sword on the ground. Then he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Sir, please spare me." He turned out to be a coward. This dramatic scene stunned Lujua. "Yes, I'm a coward." In order to survive, Rong Xiao, who was kneeling on the ground, forced himself to raise his head. He wanted to see who the other party was and whether they could be bribed. As long as they could let him live, he was willing to pay a lot of money. When he raised his head, he recognized Lujua. He immediately shouted, "Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Xiao. You don't know me? I used to do business with the city lord's mansion in the 1st city." If he did not shout like this, Lujua might not recognize him. If he was captured as an ordinary prisoner, he might have a chance to escape. But now his shout had completely exposed his identity. After Lujua heard the name Rong Xiao, he frowned and asked, "Are you the Biming merchant Rong Xiao?" Hearing Lujua call out his name and identity, Rong Xiao quickly raised his head and said, "Yes, Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Xiao. We have met before. I have even worked in the army." This time, Lujua looked carefully and recognized that the person in front of him was indeed Rong Xiao. He could not help but laugh and said, "Oh, it's really you. Come, get up quickly." As he spoke, he walked over and made a gesture of supporting him with both hands. Receiving such treatment, Rong Xiao's face was naturally filled with joy. He stood up with a smile on his face. But soon, this smile froze on his face because the next moment, a heavy punch hit his lower abdomen. With just one punch, he vomited all the food that he had just eaten. Rong Xiao's name could be said to be well known in the beginning city. Unfortunately, it was not a good reputation, but a bad reputation. It was this person who became Biming's lackey. He first persuaded Su Yuan and forced the entire new 2nd Army to surrender to Biming. For this matter, Commander Tiger's Mane had given a strict order that if one day they could catch Rong Xiao, they should not be polite to him. Lujua naturally remembered this in his heart. He thought that this person was still abusing his power in Shajing City. He never thought that he would meet him here. How could he be polite? Of course, he would teach him a lesson first. The miserable Rong Xiao was beaten up by Lujua on the spot. He knelt on the ground and vomited. He did not even have the strength to stand up. Lujua stopped and said to the soldiers beside him, "Come, lift him up and send him to Bugnam of Gojoseon for punishment." Without a leader, the 100,000 Biming army could not form an effective resistance. Even if some of the Biming army generals wanted to resist and make contributions, they could only resist for a few hours under the crazy attack of the 5-star army cavalry. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being surrounded and surrendered. Yang Qindong appeared at the gate of the 1st city with 1,000 black cavalry at noon. The first thing he saw was the captives of the Biming army and the money and supplies that they did not have time to transport when they escaped. "Young master, it's a big harvest." Beta Persei looked at all this with a grin. Yang Shindong was also in a good mood. He thought that with 70,000 Liaodong iron cavalry and 50,000 Walla elite cavalry, even if they won this battle, they would have to pay a certain price. He did not expect that Shi Hung was so afraid of death that he escaped so quickly. This was naturally because of the previous strategies that worked, but it also had a lot to do with the incompetence of the commander of the Biming army. Young master, not far away, a group of cavalry galloped over, and a shout could be heard clearly even though it was still far away. It's Tiger's Head. Beta Persei had good eyesight and recognized the person who came. He was also excited. It had been more than 2 years since the last time they were separated. Anyone would be excited to see each other again, especially Tiger's Mane, who came over on horseback, jumped off his horse when he was still more than 10 meters away from Yang Shindong, and ran over. Facing this errand boy and servant who had accompanied him since he was a child, Yang Shindong was also filled with emotions, and his eyes involuntarily became gentle. Young master, you're finally here. Tiger's Mane, who fell 10 feet in front of White Dragon, couldn't help but cry. Quick, help Tiger's Head up. Yang Shindong couldn't stand to say this the most. He could see tens of thousands of soldiers fighting and even dying on the battlefield, but he just couldn't bear to see these men in tears. Beta Persei dismounted from his horse and helped Tiger's Mane, who was kneeling on the ground, up. Tiger's Mane, who seemed to have just calmed down, burst into tears again because of Yang Shindong's words. You've worked hard. Unlike parting, Tiger's Mane was a person who would rather break than bend. He had even prepared to live and die with the first city. He also thought that he would never see the young master again in his life. At this time, seeing him again, one could imagine how excited he was. Young master, you're becoming more and more mature and charming. Tiger's Mane couldn't help but say after looking up and sizing up Yang Shindong. When he first entered the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty, Yang Shindong was only a young man who was less than 20 years old. But now, he was nearly 30 years old and was a mature middle-aged man. Even the corners of his mouth had grown a beard. How could people not be moved? Haha, Tiger's Mane, your flattery skills have also improved. With Yang Shindong's laughter, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became much more cheerful. After Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yu Mian, and the others came to greet him one by one. Yang Shindong gave each of them verbal encouragement, making them feel the warmth and importance of being close to them. After everyone greeted each other, they talked about the current situation of the battle. Tiger's Mane took the initiative to report. Young master, except for more than 10,000 people who died or were injured in battle, the rest of the 100,000 Biming army surrendered and were captured. Among them, the commander-in-chief, Rong Xiao, was also captured alive by us. You can do whatever you want with him. Very good. Yang Shindong nodded happily. This battle is much smoother than I thought. Everyone has put in a lot of effort and should be rewarded. Hehehe. Everyone chuckled when they heard this. However, only one person had a straight face. When he saw that Yang Shindong seemed to be in a good mood, he suddenly stepped forward and said, King, I don't want to be rewarded. I only request to participate in the hunting mission. Please allow it. The person who spoke was the commander of the new light cavalry, Ma Xiangshan. It was obvious that he was still angry about being stopped by the Liaodong cavalry. This time, he wanted to take revenge. When Ma Xiangshan first met Yang Shindong, they were still a high town. At that time, he had shown his strength and questioned Yang Shindong's horsemanship. In the end, it ended with the White Dragon being subdued. After not seeing each other for many years, the moment he opened his mouth, it was as if he was in a difficult position. Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yu Mian, and the others were all shocked and angrily rebuked him. Today, Yang Shindong was no longer the Yang Shindong of Hightown. He was now the Bugnam of Gojoseon. The territory he had was comparable to the Great Ming Dynasty, and the number of troops he had was enough to dominate the Great Ming Dynasty. How could he allow others to question the military plans he made? If Yang Shindong became angry and punished Ma Xiangshan, no one would be able to say anything. Chapter 1184. Commander Ma, what are you doing? Hurry up and apologize to the king. Tiger's Mane was the first to speak. It was clear that he still cared for and valued this person. Commander Ma, hurry up and apologize. Yu Mian, Yang Si, and the others also spoke up. Lu Zhua and the others, who felt that they had lost face, also hurriedly winked at Ma Xiangshan, reminding him within the appropriate range. Seeing that everyone was reprimanding him and showing concern for him, Ma Xiangshan realized that he had caused trouble. Yang Qindong was not Tiger's Mane, who could voice out his opinions in person. He immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yang Qindong. King, please forgive this subordinate's reckless words. Young master, you see, Ma Xiangshan's temper is like this. He speaks without thinking. In fact, he doesn't mean anything else, and he doesn't mean to question your decision. Please forgive his reckless behavior. Yes, Commander Ma is usually a good person. He is loyal and reliable, and does things seriously. Yang Si is willing to vouch for him. He did not mean to be disrespectful. Yang Si also spoke up at this moment, and his knees went soft as he knelt on the ground. The originally happy and harmonious scene instantly became like this. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yang Qindong's expression did not change, but he lamented in his heart. In the past, he always heard people say that it was lonely at the top and that an emperor would not have any friends. He never believed it. However, everything that happened in front of him vividly taught him a lesson. It made him understand that now everyone was actively keeping a distance from him. This might be a show of respect. However, from now on, it would not be so easy for him to be friends with these people and hear some truth. Young master, look. Seeing that Yang Qindong did not speak for a long time, and even his brother Yang Si was kneeling on the ground to plead for Ma Xiangshan, Beta Persei finally could not hold it in anymore. He asked tentatively in a low voice with a pleading expression on his face. Pucci. When Yang Qindong saw Beta Persei's reaction, he finally could not help but laugh out loud. He then pointed at the crowd and said, "What are you doing? What are you all doing? Do you really think that just because I, the young master, am in a higher position, will become estranged?" Commander Ma only gave a suggestion. He didn't do anything. Why should I punish him? Why don't you all get up? Yang Qindong said with a smile on his face. Obviously, he was not angry. Tiger's Man and the others let out a sigh of relief. But at the same time, they did not deliberately remind Ma Xiangshan to thank him. Ma Xiangshan was very clear that his actions just now were very uncomfortable. This time, his apology was sincere. Your Majesty, it's all my fault. I didn't think before speaking. Thank you for your forgiveness. Well, it's not a big deal. Besides, Commander Ma gave a military suggestion. This is what a military officer should do. There's nothing wrong with it. Not to mention, it's very reasonable. We sent too few cavalry to chase after them. Since the new army is made up of cavalry, of course, they should perform better. Not only was Yang Qindong not angry, but he also took the initiative to say what everyone wanted to say. For a moment, everyone's eyes gathered on him again. According to the military action plan that Yang Qindong had previously set, considering that the new army had been fighting for so many days, once the battle started and they broke through the joint defense line of the Baiming army and the Walla army, what they had to do was to capture prisoners and clean up the battlefield. Relatively speaking, this task was the easiest and safest. It was also beneficial for the new army to quickly recover their strength. But now, the Baiming army's front line was broken through so easily. This was really beyond Yang Qindong's expectations. Because of this, some changes could be made to the previous military plan. Noticing that everyone was looking at him with hopeful eyes, Yang Qindong asked seriously, after being besieged for so long, and with a lack of food, are you sure that your strength hasn't declined and you can participate in the next tough battle? No problem. In just an instant, all the division-level generals of the new army spoke in unison. Ignoring everyone's answer, Yang Qindong's eyes fell on Tiger's Mane. He wanted to hear his opinion. He didn't want to blindly agree because these people wanted to show off. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Tiger's Mane obviously understood what Yang Qindong meant. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then, he raised his head and said, "Young master, most of them don't have any problems. Although the siege seems dangerous, as cavalry, they don't really have many opportunities to go up the city tower. In addition, Yangtze took out the stored food half a month ago. During this period of time, everyone's physical strength has been replenished. They can accept the mission of continuous battle." "Well, you said that most of them don't have any problems. That means that some of them have problems. Tell me, which divisions need to stay behind?" Yang Qindong understood the hidden meaning in Tiger's main words. He also needed someone to stay behind to clean up the battlefield and look after the prisoners. He couldn't let the new army rush up at once. If that happened, what would happen to the safety of the beginning city? "Yes, young master. I personally think that the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division should stay behind. The other divisions can join the battle immediately." Tiger's mane didn't even turn his head. He could even imagine that his subordinates would definitely look at him with hopeful gazes. However, it was good to want to render meritorious service. However, if they didn't have enough strength and forcefully stood out, it wouldn't be meritorious service but courting death. When he mentioned the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division, Lu Zhua and Deng Yu's expressions immediately became very ugly. However, they had nothing to say. Previously, when they were defending the city, the 70,000 soldiers that Yangtze had prepared couldn't hold on any longer. The two divisions even abandoned their horses and rushed up the city tower. Only then did they protect the city. Because of this, their losses weren't small. Now, it was most appropriate for them to stay behind to defend the city and look after the prisoners. After Tiger's mane finished speaking, no one objected. Yang Qindong knew that this should be a result that everyone could accept. He immediately said, "Very good. If that's the case, the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division will stay behind. Heavy Cavalry Regiment, listen to my orders. You're ordered to wander around Tulu City. If you find any Biming army that wants to come out, fight them back. If there are too many enemy soldiers, you can return to the beginning city at any time to ask for reinforcements." "Yes." The Heavy Cavalry Regiment's commander, Winchaser, immediately agreed excitedly. "Light Cavalry Regiment and Reconnaissance Regiment, rest for a while. After that, you will set off with this king and kill your way to the Hanoi area. This time, we will make the Wara Wara pay the price. I want Yeshin's head." Yang Qindong's voice became louder and louder as he spoke. The two commanders, Ma Xiangshan and Ding Shan, immediately agreed loudly. As the war went surprisingly smoothly, Yang Qindong's vision was no longer limited to taking back the lost cities. Instead, he wanted to make a crusade against his enemies and opponents. And this time, his target was the leader of the Wara Wara, Yeshen. Although Biming was also an opponent, after all, they had a deep foundation and were powerful. If he tangled with them now, he didn't know how many troops and time he would have to invest. This was not in line with Yang Qindong's current development goal. It was better to let go of the opponent first and clench his fist to deal with Yeshen first. Of course, if Biming didn't know what was good for them and still came out to mess things up, then he didn't mind fighting a few more battles with them. The new army's military plan had been adjusted. Everyone went to prepare. Using these few hours of reorganization, Yang Qindong came to the big tent outside the city. He separately received the Far Eastern Army's commander Chun Bo, Mabe Division's commander Exine Honghai, Na Raizong, and the Mongolian generals who had joined the 5-star army. During the process of receiving them, Yang Qindong gave full recognition and praise to everyone's performance, making every general feel a sense of importance. When everyone walked out of the tent, their faces were full of satisfaction and excitement. Especially at the end, when Yang Qindong sacrificed himself to analyze the situation for them, it made them have a clearer understanding of the next step and plan. For example, the Far Eastern Army's commander Chen Bo, Yang Qindong straightforwardly asked him to rush back to the Far Eastern province. The environment there was complicated, and they couldn't lack the deterrence of the army. Of course, this time, they didn't come in vain. After the supply line was opened, soon new supplies would be sent from the sea through the Liaodong region. This time, when Chun Bo and the others returned, they could send a large number of logistical supplies back. This would play a very positive role in speeding up the development of the Far Eastern province. Sixth young master, I will leave you a division. Next, we will deal with Yesen of the Wara. He is not an easy person to deal with. Of course, the more the better. I also want to let my soldiers see the true style of the 5-star Army's cavalry. Chunbo was in favor of withdrawing the army back to the Far Eastern province. Originally, this time, he came here to launch a surprise attack and rescue the heavily injured Mo Bay City and Shur City. Now that the mission was completed, of course, he had to go back. However, he still hoped to leave a division behind so that they could learn more from Yang Chendong. In the face of Chunbo's request, Yang Chendong thought about it for a while and agreed. No matter what, he was still the commander of an army. Moreover, he stayed in that bitter cold place all year round. If he made a request, he would have to fulfill it. After Chun Bo left a division behind, Narisong was also allowed to bring 20,000 Mongolian cavalry to participate in the next battle. Yang Chendong only had one request for him, and that was to follow orders. Since those small Mongolian tribes wanted to have a share of the pie in the war, they must obey orders and follow orders. If they couldn't do this, then they should leave as soon as possible. Now, Yang Xie didn't have to rely on these small Mongolian tribes. Chapter 1185. Yang Xie's continued growth and economic development, especially after defeating the Baiming army in the world of Wara, made the small Mongolian tribes see the rise of a powerful 5-star army, a new force. They could only look up to the 5-star army and didn't dare to have the slightest disrespect. After knowing that the order was personally given by Bugnam of Gojoseon, no one dared to refuse. They all said that they would obey the military order, and some even directly said that they wanted to join the 5-star army. In their opinion, finding a strong backer would be more beneficial to their tribe's future development. For those who wanted to rely on him, Yang Chendong didn't have no choice but to accept all of them. He asked Yang Er to investigate carefully and make sure that their strength could play a role before accepting them. On the contrary, some of the small tribe leaders who had their own plans were already dead in Yang Chendong's heart. For the future generations, he wouldn't allow other armed forces to exist under his rule. Even if they were to rely on him, he wouldn't allow them to join the 5-star army. He also had to disrupt their original organization, which meant that he had to completely eat them up. In the future, people who joined him and rebelled often happened, and it happened more than once. It also caused a lot of headaches for those who thought that they were broad-minded. Yang Chendong didn't want to make this kind of mistake again. Either they were completely used by the 5-star army, or they were completely destroyed. There was no third choice. Of course, this wasn't something that could be done just by saying it. If he wanted to do this, it would take a long time. What Yang Chendong needed to do was to shorten this process as much as possible and completely unify the entire Mongolian grassland. After meeting the generals and assigning them their respective tasks, the last person Yang Chendong met was the captured Baiming general, or more precisely the businessman, Rong Xiao. This businessman who used the commercial resources of the 5-star army and relied on his identity as a Han to make a fortune. Now, he actually used the money he earned from the 5-star army to deal with the 5-star army. With this kind of two-faced character, Yang Chendong couldn't tolerate him. He had to kill him as an example to those who had bad intentions. Rong Xiao, who was tied up, was like a fat pig that was about to be slaughtered. He was tied to a piece of wood and carried into the tent. As he entered, a fishy stench spread throughout the tent. Beta Persei, who was standing on the side, wrinkled his nose, asked with an unhappy expression, "What's going on? Did you throw him into a cesspool?" Second brother, "No. He was so scared that he peed and pooped. I just gave him a simple wash, but I didn't expect him to pee again." Longwei's captain, Ba Daojiang, who was responsible for bringing him in, said with a face full of disdain, "Oof, you dare to make an enemy out of our 5-star army with just this little bit of ability? Knowing that this was all because Rong Xiao was too cowardly, Yang Er snorted unhappily. Yang Chendong's expression was normal. In the past, in order to complete a mission, he had come into contact with all kinds of environments. It was just some strange smells. It really didn't make him feel any discomfort. He first looked at Rong Xiao, who had fainted from fright, and nodded. "Come, wake him up." Splash! A large bucket of cold water was then handed over to Rong Xiao. A wave of coldness directly stimulated him, causing him to struggle and shout loudly. "Ah, don't kill me, don't kill me. I'm willing to surrender to the 5-star army. I'm willing to serve the grandfathers of the 5-star army." Rong Xiao really didn't have a backbone. If it was said that he was tortured by Long Wei for a period of time, he was already scared out of his wits at this moment, and he couldn't help but shout when he woke up. After shouting for a while, he found that no one was paying attention to him. Only then did he have the courage to open his eyes and look at the surroundings. He saw Bugnam of Gojozi and Yang Chendong sitting at the head of the tent, wearing a golden robe. "Ah, Bugnam of Gojozian." Rong Xiao, who was once met by Yang Chendong because he was a businessman, immediately recognized Bugnam of Gojozian's identity, and his eyes flashed with panic and surprise. Speaking of which, he felt sorry for Bugnam. Now that Bugnam of Gojozian had found him, he was not afraid. But he believed even more that the King of Hell was easy to meet, and the little devils were hard to deal with. Compared to those Long Wei who used various means to deal with him, he believed that Yang Chendong should be easier to talk to, because people with such an identity would not take him seriously. As long as the other party was happy, he might be let go like a fart. Thinking of this, Rong Xiao, who was lying on the ground, suddenly got up and came to a place 5 meters in front of Yang Chendong at a fast speed. He kowtowed to the ground. "Bugnam of Gojozian, I was wrong. Please be magnanimous and spare my life. I promise that the Rong family will completely obey your orders in the future and work for the 5-star army. I will be your dog in the future, and I will bite whoever you ask me to. By the way, our Rong family has been doing business for generations, and we have a lot of connections in Biming. If you want to do something, we will definitely do it well and won't let you down. I only ask that you spare my life to show your magnanimity and magnanimity. I believe that many people will join you." Rong Xiao deserved to be a businessman. When he said these words, he didn't even stutter. It was as if these words had been rehearsed by him many times in his heart. The Rong family had indeed been doing business for generations. They had experienced being looked down upon by others at the beginning, and now they had a wide influence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been conferred the title of general and could lead 100,000 soldiers just because they had done one thing. It was a good thing for the 5-star army and Yang Chendong to have such a congenial person. With them around, he would be able to gain a better understanding of the Northern Ming dynasty. Or if it was another person, he would nod and agree. Unfortunately, he met Yang Chendong. It was because of Rong Xiao that the new Second Army had experienced a tragedy. Even among the captives in the Battle of the First City, many people who were originally from the new Second Army had been captured. Some of them had really betrayed Biming, while some of them hadn't. It was just that the environment had forced them to work hard for Biming in order to survive. It was because of Rong Xiao that the commander and the others had experienced a humiliation that they would never forget in their lives. This kind of approach was often more uncomfortable than killing them. If it weren't for Yang Chendong's enough trust in the commander, he and the entire new Second Army would not have a good ending. It was because of Rong Xiao that the 100,000 people in Shajing City and Jingzhou City had not seen the sun for several months. The happy smile on their faces in the past had disappeared. Instead, they were living like walking corpses. No one wanted to experience the feeling of going from heaven to hell again. It was because of Rong Xiao that the guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi, had to die to show his loyalty. Such a loyal person who protected his master was killed by this villain in front of him. It was because of Rong Xiao that the two cities had to temporarily rely on Biming in order to survive. Because of this, Biming in the War of Wara had no scruples and could besiege the first city. So many good soldiers had died tragically. It was because of Rong Xiao. There were many more that Yang Chendong didn't want to say or think about. And all of this was because of Rong Xiao's personal reasons. In the face of such a person who could be said to have committed a heinous crime, even if there's a flower in the sky, how could he forgive him? Compared to the benefits of getting along well with the Rong family, if Rong Xiao didn't die, how many people would be disappointed? How could he face the heroes who died in the defense of the first city and the soldiers of the new second army? Rong Xiao must die. This was the ending that no one could change, but he shouldn't die here, but in Shajing City. It should be handled by Baiming and the others. Take him down and send him to the new second army. It's okay as long as he doesn't die in the process. These words had already represented Rong Xiao's ending. There was even a hidden meaning in the words. That was, he would let everyone torture Rong Xiao along the way, as long as Rong Xiao didn't die. It was best to let him suffer a fate worse than death, and let him know what would happen if he offended the five-star army. It was almost time, and Yang Qindong was ready to set off with the army. In contrast, the Wara had run for several hours. Although Tian, Hu, and the others had already chased after them, they were alone and didn't bring enough money and food, so they couldn't be at ease. Order the new 1st Army Reconnaissance Regiment to be the left vanguard, responsible for the safety of the left wing. Order the new 1st Army Light Cavalry Regiment to be the right vanguard, responsible for the safety of the right wing. Order the 20,000 Mongolian troops, led by Nari Song, and the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Daikwa, to be the middle. Order the 4th Army Division to be the rear, escorting the army's money and food. Set off. In the big tent, Yang Qindong shook his arm and shouted. More than 50,000 troops went south from the first city. Looking at the back of the army, the new 1st Army commander, Tiger's Mane, was filled with emotion. The 5-star army has completely grown up. Yes, but our future mission is still a long way to go. Yu Mian, the lord of the first city, also sighed. Haha, don't be emotional at this time. We still have too many things to do. Reorganizing the captive army and preparing to receive the new supplies, we still need the cooperation of the army commander and the lord of the first army. Yang Si chuckled, looking quite proud. It was no wonder that he was so happy. More than 70,000 Wala cavalry, more than 90,000 Baiming infantrymen, and nearly 70,000 infantrymen from Shi Wanshan's headquarters. This was more than 200,000 troops, and now they all needed to be reorganized. This task mostly fell on him, the logistics division commander. Although the task was heavy, he was very happy. With so many troops, he could do a lot of things in the future. Don't worry, we will fully support you if you need anything. Yu Mian also said with a smile. But at the same time, he didn't forget to put forward a condition. It's just that the inner and outer walls of the first city have been damaged in this battle. With so many laborers, can Division Commander Yang Si help me? That's not a problem. We don't have anything else now, but we have people. Ha ha ha. Yang Si laughed. At this moment, not only him, but Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian also laughed together. Chapter 1186. Compared to the joy of the new army, at this time, Shi Hung was leading the army to strengthen the defense of Tulu City. In the battle outside the beginning city, the Baiming army was defeated and retreated. Rong Xiao's 100,000 troops were all captured by the 5-star army. Not only that, he just received news that Shajing and Jingzhou City were once again controlled by the 5-star army's new second army and returned to the embrace of Bugnam of Gojoseon. All kinds of unfavorable news came, and Shi Heng's face became very ugly. He already knew that this attack on the grasslands had ended in failure. He didn't dare to imagine what kind of reaction the emperor would have once he knew this news. What he had to do now was to mend the pen after the sheep were lost and find someone to take the blame. Shi Heng's earliest preparation was to let Xinguang, who retreated first, take the blame. For this reason, he also ordered Xinguang, who retreated to Tulu City, to be arrested. Now he was in the dungeon's interrogation room. He hoped that he could use his words to persuade the other party to take all the blame. This way, his responsibility as the commander would be reduced by a lot. In order to strengthen his power, Shi Hung also invited Fong Dingshan over. The two of them interrogated one person together, which was enough to give Tsingguang face. Bring people to commit the crime. Shi Hung said with some momentum as he slammed the wooden block on the desk. Bring people to commit. Wei. Woo. The group of Yamen runners standing on both sides also shouted loudly, raising the tense atmosphere to the extreme. In the midst of the shouting, Tsingguang, shackled and shackled, walked into the hall under the protection of two bailiffs. Although he was still far away, the clattering sound could be heard. The shouts continued, as if to create an extremely tense atmosphere. Shi Hung, who was sitting behind the desk, was already waiting to see Tsingguang's current appearance. Tsingguang's face would definitely turn pale, and he would kneel down and beg for mercy the moment he saw him. If that was the case, wouldn't Tsingguang have to say whatever he wanted him to say? The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Tsingguang finally appeared, but he did not show the slightest sign of fear. Instead, he looked lazy and sleepy. When he saw Shi Hung and Fong Dingshan, he even yawned and said with a smile, "Sigh, even if I caught the wrong person, I shouldn't have let Marquis and General Fong come here personally. I'm really flattered." He did not seem to be afraid at all. On the contrary, he was so calm. In the eyes of Shi Hung and Fong Dingshan, they were surprised. The two of them first looked at each other. After confirming that the person who came was Tsingguang, Shi Hung suddenly picked up the wooden block and said, "Tsingguang, don't pretend to be crazy here. Marquis is asking you, do you know your crime?" The sound of the wooden block reverberated in the interrogation room. It was quite imposing. However, this was nothing to Tsingguang, who was like a hob. He could even laugh and said, "Crime? What crime have I committed?" "You." Shi Hung was really angered by Tsingguang's shameless behavior. He pointed at him and said, "You led the troops to retreat without a military order, which led to our defeat in the Battle of Beginning City. Isn't this enough to sentence you to death?" "What? Is there such a thing?" Tsingguang said with an obedient look. "What? You dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it? Deputy Commander Tsin, this is not what a man should do." Fong Dingshan, the deputy judge at the side, finally spoke. He could not stand the kind of generals who fled in the face of battle. They were obviously not very capable, but they were in a high position. Such people were like vermin and were really hateful. Facing Fong Dingshan's interrogation, Tsingguang was also not anxious. "General Fong, who are you talking about? From what I know, when faced with the charge of the Five-Star Army, you didn't even fire a single arrow before retreating. Could it be that your actions are what a man should do?" At this moment, Fong Dingshan's face flushed red. He was actually being questioned in return. He was not as thick-skinned as Tsingguang, who could be indifferent in the face of questioning. Although he was greedy for money, he also cherished his reputation. He immediately said angrily, "Bullshit. The reason why the Liaodong cavalry retreated was because Admiral Shi gave a military order. We followed the order and also to preserve the strength of our Baiming army." "Oh, if that's the case, then I also retreated to preserve my strength." Tsingguang was good with words and directly used the other party's reason to explain his actions. "This is not the same," Fong Dingshan said angrily. "I retreated because I received the Admiral's order." "You didn't. You think I didn't do it just because you said so?" asked Marquis. "Didn't you give me the order to retreat first?" Tsingguang ignored Fong Dingshan and looked to Shi Hung, who was sitting on the other side. "The situation is like this. When the Admiral saw that Rong Xiao, who was the vanguard, didn't know how to command and fight, and was the first to escape, he relied on his many years of experience on the battlefield. In order to preserve more strength, he immediately gave the order for the entire army to retreat. It was under this order that our Great Tong Army and General Fong's Liaodong cavalry took the opportunity to retreat back to Tulu City. This sealed off the Five-Star Army's entrance to Baiming, and at the same time preserved the strength of the army. In this battle, Marquis' command wasn't wrong. The mistake was Shi Wanshan's betrayal, the Wara's escape, and Rong Xiao's cowardice. This made the opportunity to severely damage the Five-Star Army and even capture Bugnam of Gojoseon go to waste. There was no mistake in the command and preparation of this battle. Marquis and General Fong, was that not the case? As if he was telling a story, Tsingguang's words were full of chapters and chapters as he narrated the entire story. Shi Heng and Fong Dingshan were stunned when they heard this. If they didn't experience it themselves, they would also think that this was what happened. Without waiting for the two to react, Tsingguang continued, "Of course, if the two of you insist that I am guilty, then there is another explanation. Admiral Shi didn't know how to maintain a good relationship between the two armies, so the war suddenly retreated at a critical moment. Admiral Shi and Fong Dingshan saw that the situation was going to change, so in order to protect their own lives, they forced Rong Xiao to lead 100,000 soldiers to their deaths. Only Vice General Tsingguang saw the problem, but because they had been besieging the city for many days, their strength was limited, so in order to preserve the strength of the army, they had no choice but to retreat first. Unfortunately, in order to cover up the truth, Admiral Shi killed all the witnesses and pushed all the blame to Tsingguang. In the blink of an eye, it was a completely different explanation. After saying this, Tsingguang intentionally shrugged and said, "Right, I've already written a memorial for the second explanation. As long as I don't leave this place today, someone will send it to Beiming. When the time comes, His Majesty will definitely see it. Perhaps he won't believe it, or perhaps he will. In that case, everything will be up to the heavens. Naturally, the choice is still in the hands of the two of you. Do as you see fit." At this moment, Tsingguang was extremely relaxed. He didn't seem like a criminal at all. On the contrary, he seemed more like an interrogator. The second explanation was like a heavy hammer to Shi Heng and Fong Dingshan's heads. The two of them couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Only now did they realize that they had somewhat underestimated this Tsingguang in the past. It turned out that this was a smart person. They didn't know that everything Tsingguang did was the idea given to him by Su Dei. And this idea came from Yang Chendong. No wonder Shi Heng and Fong Dingshan were stunned. In this battle, Su Dei originally wanted to take the opportunity to return to the embrace of the five-star army. He was even confident that he could capture Tsingguang and make a great contribution. However, this was not what Yang Chendong wanted. A good-for-nothing general like Tsingguang would not be an obstacle to Yang Chendong's unification of the world. On the contrary, having such a person by me would only be beneficial and not harmful to him. Once he captured him, not only would he not be able to severely damage the strength of the Beiming army, but he would also help the other party to eliminate villains. Why would Yang Chendong do that? As for Su Dei, he played an unparalleled role in the battle outside the beginning city. It was better for such a person to continue to stay in the Beiming army. At least now was not the time for him to come to the five-star army. Of course, Yang Chendong would remember all these contributions in his heart. Once he returned one day, he would definitely give them a position that he was satisfied with. Having said that, Tsingguang's two statements entered the ears of the two generals. As long as one was not stupid, one would naturally know how to choose. Although there was a hint of being threatened, whether it was Shi Heng or Fong Dingshan, they were the kind of people who cared about their reputation. They absolutely did not want to have a scandal, let alone lose the imperial favor. In the end, the two looked at each other and laughed. Then, Shi Heng said, "Deputy Commander Tsin is indeed a pillar of the country. It seems that everything is really a misunderstanding. Come, quickly remove the shackles." Tsingguang was released just like that. The explanation to the outside world was that his withdrawal was originally approved by the admiral. It was just that he withdrew too quickly, so it caused a misunderstanding. Following that, Tsingguang's first statement was written into a memorial to the emperor and reported to the Daizong emperor. The 50,000 cavalrymen of Walla were like a black whirlwind on the grassland, heading straight towards Shajing City. At the most critical moment, Yesen was the first to withdraw his troops. He did not dare to gamble. He did not dare to believe in his ally, the Beiming army, which led to a great defeat outside the beginning city. Of course, the Beiming army was defeated. They lost 100,000 troops. For Yesen, it was just some provisions that could not be taken away because he was in a hurry. When he returned to Hanoi and gathered his general, Beaumur, provisions would not be a problem. Leader, the fast horse scouts reported that the five-star army is still chasing us 50 miles behind us. They have not given up. General Chao Lu rode to Yeshen's side and reported in a hurry. Chapter 1187. They're still chasing? How many people do they have? Yeshen's face flashed with anger. He had already been defeated, but he was still the first army to retreat. This was giving enough face to the five-star army. Moreover, when he attacked the beginning city, he didn't use a single soldier, saber, or sword. On the contrary, he even lost 100,000 soldiers when he attacked North Desert City. No matter how he looked at it, he was the one who suffered a loss. Why was the five-star army so tightly holding on to him and not letting him go? Replying to the leader, they have about 50,000 people. They have more people than us. Among them, there's also the existence of the most elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division. When Chao Lu answered these questions, he felt a chill down his spine. Unlike Baiming and Southern Ming, where most of the soldiers were infantry, the 1st Cavalry Division was in the limelight in the grasslands where the majority of the soldiers were cavalry. It was not something that other tribes and forces could compare to. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. For many people in the grasslands, the 1st Cavalry Division represented a destructive existence. Continue to retreat. When he heard that the other side had more people than him, and that there was the existence of the invincible elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division, Yeshen lost the desire to compete. He helplessly shook his head and gave the order to continue the retreat. Reporting, just as Yeshen gave the order, the fast horse scout in front of him came in front of him again. Reporting to the leader, there's a group of cavalry with the banner of the five-star army 30 miles in front of us. They are blocking our way. There's a five-star army cavalry in front of us. Yeshen was shocked by this news. Leader, it should be the five-star army's new second army. Chao Lu thought of something and whispered to Yeshen. Slapping his forehead, Yeshen nodded. That's right, it should be them. The useless Baiming. After conquering 2 cities, don't they know how to completely destroy the new second army? Now, they've become popular again. Yes, the Baiming army is too incompetent. But Chief, now that they're targeting us, what should we do? Chao Lu was also complaining about the incompetence of the Baiming army, but now was not the time to complain. Instead, he had to face the problem. What else can we do? Let's split up and meet the enemy. The rest of the cavalry will circle around them and rush back to Hanoi. Helplessly, he said, in the past, if a mere new second army dared to stop 50,000 elite cavalrymen from Wara, Yeshen would definitely teach them a lesson. But now, he couldn't take such a risk. Once his main force was entangled with the enemy, the five-star army cavalry would catch up to him. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. This was to strengthen the soil and break the wrist. Chao Lu asked carefully, Chief, how many people should we send to meet the enemy? Everyone knew that the cavalrymen sent to meet the new second army would never return. But the number of people was the key. If there were too few, it wouldn't be effective. If there were too many, the losses would be too great. It was not a good choice. Send 20,000 soldiers. After all, the new second army's strength is greatly damaged. If we send more people, they might be able to rush out and meet up with us in Hanoi. Yeshen was indeed an ambitious person. Without even thinking about it, he betrayed all 20,000 of his men. The so-called sending more people to defeat the new second army was just an excuse. In the end, Yeshen was afraid that if he sent too few people, they wouldn't be able to entangle the new second army and affect his escape plan. Chao Lu was naturally aware of this point, but this was the chief's order, so he had to carry it out. He immediately agreed and went to make the arrangements. We'll leave from the sides, Yeshen said with heartache. When they came with 150,000 soldiers. But when they returned, they only had 30,000 men and horses. They even lost their provisions. This was an undeniable defeat. In front of the small yellow river in front of Shajing City, the new Second Army was laying in ambush here, waiting for the Wara cavalrymen to escape here. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill them. Report: General, the Wara cavalry has split up. 30,000 of them left from the flanks. About 20,000 of them are heading straight for us. The scout in charge of scouting turned back and reported to the general standing in front of the army. Understood. Spy nodded with a solemn expression. Obviously, this situation was completely within his expectations. The enemy has split up, so the pressure on us has decreased a lot. Now we're only dealing with 20,000 cavalrymen. Everyone must cheer up and show the might of a new Second Army. Yes, Kong Ji and the other two division commanders replied loudly. In fact, even if there were 20,000 Wala cavalry, it would still be a huge pressure for the new Second Army. After going through so many things, the new Second Army was now short of an infantry division, and the other three divisions were not complete. At most, there were only 18,000 soldiers. Moreover, the number of horses in the army was not enough. Many of the original cavalrymen had to be converted to infantry because of the lack of horses. Kong Ji looked at his subordinates, who were supposed to have more than 8,000 cavalrymen, but now there were only about 4,000 cavalrymen and 2,000 infantry. He couldn't help but curse. It's all because of those damn Baiming. They stole our horses. Otherwise, with the strength of the new Second Army, it would be easy to deal with 20,000 cavalrymen. Okay, Mr. Kong, don't complain. Save some strength to deal with the enemy. Go and check on the preparation of the bows and arrows. She understood Kong Ji's frustration. How could he not be the same? However, this was a war. It was not a war where two people could curse each other. It was not a war where one could win by talking. Although Su Yuan betrayed the five-star army and ended up with his corpse, he still did some good things. For example, a large number of military supplies were stored in Shajing City. Among them, bows and caltrops were the most abundant. Considering that the most likely enemy on the grassland was the cavalrymen, the Baiming army was well prepared. Because the Baiming army was mainly attacking the beginning city this time, many of the equipment that was used to deal with the cavalrymen were temporarily not used. They were left in the city. This time, the new Second Army benefited. Commander, don't worry. The bows and arrows are ready. We also prepared 400 meters of caltrops. I guarantee that the enemy's cavalrymen will suffer heavy losses. Kong Ji's face was full of confidence when he said this. Good. This is a turnaround for the five-star army. Although we were forced to do what we did before, it is inevitable that some of our brothers will have some opinions about us. Now is the time to prove everything with actions. There must not be any problems. She nodded heavily and said, Now, everything was ready. They only lacked the east wind. For hours later, the east wind, which was the enemy, appeared. Looking from afar, it was as if they covered the sky and the earth. People said that there were more than 10,000 soldiers. When 20,000 cavalrymen came from afar, the battle formation could not be described with words. Prepare for battle. Archers, get ready. Kong Ji, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, rode on his horse and shouted loudly. There were 6,000 archers in the 3 divisions. They were waiting for the enemy to arrive at the designated location so that they could launch a fatal attack. The earth shook and shouts shook the sky. 20,000 elite cavalrymen of the Wala Empire came from afar, shouting slogans that only the people of the grassland could understand. When the distance between them was still 800 meters, they began to perform all kinds of equestrian tactical movements. They either hid their bodies on the side of the warhorse, or bent their bodies over the horse to minimize the area of their exposed body parts. Or they knocked their bows and arrows and prepared to launch a counterattack on the horse. This was an evenly matched battle. There were no tricks to be played. The reason why it was said to be evenly matched was because the Wala cavalry had the advantage in terms of numbers. It was just that they had limited time to fight. If it wasn't for the fact that the elite cavalry of the 5-star army were rushing over the 20,000 Walla cavalry would not have used such a method of charging. Instead, they would have attacked from the left, middle, and right. Only then would they be able to maximize their advantage in numbers. However, time did not allow for it. They had no choice but to use the wolf pack tactic. The so-called wolf pack tactic could also be called a swarm. It was like a pack of wolves. Once they saw the target, they would tear it into pieces and finally complete the mission of killing and defeating the enemy. It could be said that the ancient cavalry battles were very dangerous. It was about the coordination of tactics, the advantage in numbers, and the use of geographical and weather conditions. Of course, the morale of the two armies and the weapons used would also directly affect the final result of the battle. As for the battle between the two armies, it was almost impossible for both sides to fight. Unless it was under special circumstances, neither side would choose to do so. It was very difficult to train a general. It required a lot of resources and time. How could they sacrifice themselves in a battle like this? This was just something that movies and TV dramas did on purpose. The 20,000 Walla Army's cavalrymen were approaching step by step, and their speed was very fast. Their forces were also very scattered. It gave people a feeling that they did not know where to start. It was as if the attack was not the main point, and the attack was the main point. This was the essence of the wolf pack tactic. It made the opponent confused and could only choose to attack. In this way, if they did not deal with it well, they could be defeated like a mountain. The reason why the Walla cavalry chose to attack like this was because they had the advantage in numbers. They were thinking of ways to expand their advantage and achieve the military goal of winning the battle. Archers scatter. 300 in a squadron, 100 in a small squad. Adopt a stacked attack. Kong Ji was not someone to be trifled with. Seeing that the opponent was about to expand their advantage in numbers, he was not willing to let it go. He immediately adopted the corresponding countermeasures. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.